Chapter 481 Discuss Where to Go. Naruto was stunned by Yako's actions, but Yako just smiled when she saw this. Facing the night wind, Naruto sat cross-legged on the roof of the car, leaning on the beautiful senior sister Yazi. The off-road vehicle was driving on a stable road, and everyone's hearts were rarely quiet. After a while, Yako's head rested lightly on Naruto's shoulder and fell asleep. Seeing this, Naruto couldn't help shaking his head. Yako is just a girl. Although her strength is very powerful, even a strong man is far inferior. However, since the disaster began, everyone has been running around for so long. Especially Yazi, as a kendo practitioner, she has to fight all the time. Naruto's strong physical fitness and abilities have long been exercised in the ninja world. This level of physical exertion is nothing, but Yako is different. Her physical strength is also limited, although she has rested for a while before, but that is also it's only been a while. The spirit has been suppressed for so long, and the body has become exhausted after the fatigue of the battle. Looking at the profile of her face that was quietly leaning on her shoulders, it seemed that there was a faint fluorescence in the moonlight, and it looked completely different from before going to bed. He quietly stretched out his hand to support the slender waist of the waist. The tentacles were soft and slippery. Naruto couldn't help but feel a little moved, and quickly comforted himself in his heart. This was just to keep the child from falling, definitely not to take advantage of it. Yako was very sensitive, and Naruto's movements immediately woke her up, but she just lifted her eyelids slightly before falling back into a deep sleep, the corners of her mouth showing a slight curvature. Sitting on the roof of the car, holding a beautiful woman and blowing the cool wind, if you don't consider the factors of this collapsed world, this is also a very good mood. However, the reality still has to be faced after all. Naruto didn't have any shy thoughts at this time. He was thinking and pondering, how can he get rid of the current predicament? He came from crossing. The purpose is to restore the chakra, and then try to use space ninjutsu to see if he can return to the world of Hokage. But at this moment, the status quo has made him unable to control himself. He can only use a little bit of chakra, and he is forced into a situation where he has to be moved by this inexplicable world that has fallen into the doomsday. As the 6th generation of Hokage, he has never been so helpless. It's a pity that he has no clue as to the cause of this disaster. Now that chakra has not recovered, it is only possible to find a temporary and stable place to live, and then slowly find opportunities for breakthroughs. Naruto thought to himself. Moreover, the girls in the car must also be accommodated. If you are alone, you don't need to have any scruples no matter where you go, so you must arrange them first. In contemplation, Naruto and his party drove out of Bed Main City and came to the suburban road. The car stopped slowly, the night gradually faded, and it was almost dawn. Yazi, who had slept for 2 hours, finally woke up. Sitting on the roof of the car, she stretched out a big lazy waist. Naruto, have I slept for a long time? She looked at Naruto with her big, misty eyes slightly open, and the lazy aura on her face made her more kind and beautiful. Naruto shook his head slightly. It's not done yet, you can continue to sleep for a while. No, Naruto, you should take a rest. Yako knew that when he was sleeping, he had been holding him to prevent him from falling off the car, and he couldn't help but be slightly moved, and Naruto was also he hasn't slept all night, but he has never rested until now. Hearing this, Naruto smiled faintly. At this moment, Shizuka in the car suddenly asked, Naruto, it's already out of the bed market, where should we go next? Naruto pondered for a while. I think everyone should get off the bus first, have something to eat and discuss where to go. Well, that's fine. Anyway, I have nowhere to go now. Just listen to other people's opinions. Shizuka nodded, then turned to wake up Yanyi and Mommy next to her. Several people in the back seat of the car woke up. The girls all opened their eyes in a daze. Before Shizuka was driving, everyone was asleep, but was woken up and stretched reluctantly. Naruto and Yako jumped off the roof of the car, opened 2 doors, and let the girls get out of the car. It's stuck to the body. As soon as they got out of the car, they tidied up their messy hair and clothes from sleeping, and muttered. Okay, everyone, now we have to face a choice. Where do you want to go next? Naruto clapped his hands, and the girls all looked at him. After listening to him, all the girls fell silent. One time. Yanyi, Guixin, Shiji, and Otom all live in Jino City, which is a long way from here. It has only been a day since the crisis broke out. In this day, in addition to the fear of disaster in their hearts, the most concerned are the parents at home, but, seeing the general situation of the bed owner city, they are actually ready in their hearts. At this time, Naruto asked, and the four girls became hesitant. On the one hand, they wanted to go back to see their parents. On the other hand, they felt that this would put everyone in danger. For a while, they all fell silent. As for Yako, because her only father is in a foreign dojo, she is now free of worries. Mami's mother is in Tokyo. Although she is a little worried about her father who performs police functions, there is no way to persuade her before. Miyamoto Rei is now alone, her father is also a policeman, and her mother is a primary school teacher in Shinbud City. Because she can't contact them, she really wants to go back to find her parents. On the other hand, Saya also wanted to go back and see how his father was doing. After everyone gathered together to discuss for a while, Naruto frowned immediately. Everyone was almost tied, and it was very difficult to deal with. After pondering for a while, Shay suddenly said, well, since everyone wants to go back and see their relatives, let's start from here, go to the place close to home first, and then look at it all the way. Naruto looked at her, nodded and said, Saya's proposal is not bad, so it will be fair to everyone. With Naruto's affirmation, Saya smiled slightly smugly. After thinking about it, she said again, but now we have to find a place to rest and rectify, and Naruto should also have a good rest. Chapter 482 Arrive at Nanrika's house. Well, in that case, I have a good place here. It's still very close to here. Shizuka tilted her head and pondered, and suddenly said. Shizuka-sensei, do you have a good place to go? Saya asked suddenly. Well, it shouldn't be far from here. I guess it's less than 10 kilometers away. That's the place my friend rented. It's a rental apartment. Now it's empty. I'll help her clean it up, so I should go there this week. Shizuka said. That's great, we're worried that we don't have a place to sleep. It's too uncomfortable to sleep in the car, and I'm afraid of danger in other places. Now my body is sticky, I really want to take a shower. Shay exclaimed excitedly. The girls' eyes lit up when they heard it. To be honest, everyone was crowded together in the car. After a day's hard work, everyone was sweating more or less, plus the blood splashed by the dead bodies, and the sweat was mixed together, and the smell was particularly unpleasant. Especially Shizuka, she was sitting on Naruto before, and she couldn't help but feel the friction between the two, which made her pants still sticky and uncomfortable. Oh, by the way, who among you can drive? Shizuka asked again. The girls all shook their heads. Hey, that's right, everyone is still a student. I don't even have a driver's license. Originally, there was one car over there, but then everyone can take 2 cars. Now it seems that it is unnecessary. Shizuka got into the car while talking. Mommy is a little depressed. She has graduated, but unfortunately she has no right to speak without a driver's license. Everyone also got into the car and drove towards the road ahead. Mammy's friend's house is in the neighborhood around Shinbud City, and soon the car drove into the neighborhood. However, there were still many dead bodies wandering in the neighborhood at this time, and the car took a long time to arrive at the house. With tall courtyard walls and heavy iron gates, this house still looks very good. At least there are courtyard walls and iron gates that are several meters high, so there is no need to worry about the dead bodies coming in when everyone is resting. However, everyone also encountered problems at this time. Although the house in front is good, there are still many dead bodies around, and there are hundreds of them in total. I want to drive the car under the eyes of so many dead bodies. It is not easy to enter the yard, and someone has to open the door. Teacher Shizuka, Give me the key to the door. Naruto stood up, looked around on the roof of the car, and said to Shizuka below. Okay. Shizuka hurriedly took out the key and threw it to Naruto. Naruto smiled lightly, reached out his hand to catch the key, and said, Teacher Shizuka, just drive at the current speed, and I'll open the door for you. As soon as the voice fell, Naruto jumped directly from the roof of the car, rushed to the big iron gate, inserted the key into the shrinkage hole, and opened the gate. At this time, a group of dead bodies next to him had noticed Naruto's existence and rushed towards him. If it were an ordinary person, under the siege of dozens of dead bodies, there is no time to open the door. I am afraid that they will tear up the body as soon as they reach the door, but Naruto is not an ordinary person. With his hand, even if all these dead bodies surrounded him, he would be helpless. After Naruto opened the door, he kicked straight back, kicked a dead body that had just jumped up, and flew out in the middle of the abdomen with a bang, knocking down a dead body behind him. He pushed the big iron gate hard and shouted towards Shizuka behind, Come in quickly. Use the fastest speed. Yes. Shizuka stepped on the accelerator hard, the whole car started frantically, and slammed into the gate where Naruto was at a rapid speed, and the dead bodies along the way were knocked out one after another. Holding the long oak knife in his hand, he slashed the dead bodies that had been knocked over with all his strength. Finally, the off-road vehicle knocked over a dozen dead bodies and rushed towards the door. Just when the car just arrived in front of Naruto, Naruto jumped up more than 3 meters high, and only returned to the ground when the car flew into the yard. Then, he forced the two doors to close together. Together, lock the key. The crowd sighed slightly. Outside the big iron gate, several dead bodies were still reaching for something in the courtyard with their hands outstretched. Naruto borrowed the wooden knife in his hand and suddenly stabbed a few times towards the iron gate. Puff puff. The heads of the dead bodies shattered like watermelons, and blood and brains splashed all over the floor. Good swordsmanship. Yako was slightly startled, looking at Naruto's movements with admiration. Naruto turned around and returned the wooden sword to Yako, and said, Hurry into the house, the dead bodies on the side of the door are almost wiped out, and if more dead bodies are brought in, I am afraid this door will not be able to stop it. The girls heard the words and hurriedly opened the door and walked into the house. Naruto was the last to enter the house. Before entering the house, he buried the 7 or 8 self-made detonating talismans left on his body at the gate of the courtyard. After finishing all this, he entered the house. In the room, the girls brought in all the food from before, and when Naruto entered the room, they breathed a sigh of relief. It's so good. Finally there is a place to rest. The girls said excitedly. Shizuka giggled and said, Although this is my friend's house, she hasn't been here for a long time. You can treat it as my house, and you can just order whatever you want. Well, we won't be polite, Teacher Shizuka. Otome ran over and hugged her and shouted, Hey, where is the bathing place? We can't take it anymore. Don't worry, there are too many people. I have to get you some sheets first. There shouldn't be enough rooms by then, so everyone can sleep on the floor. Shizuka turned on all the lights in the room. Although it is almost dawn now, the sun has not yet come out. After a day of running and tired, the girls are already yawning. Shizuka ran upstairs and asked everyone to follow. Coming upstairs, there are 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. The master bedroom is very large with a large bed, which can almost sleep 3 or 4 people sideways. Then, she ran to the closet again, rummaged around and finally found a pile of sheets, threw them on the bed, then glanced at Naruto again, and beckoned to the girls. Well, here are some clothes, let's see which ones suit you, and then change them after you shower. Chapter 483 Bath. Wow, speaking of which, we didn't even bring clothes when we came out. Hee, fortunately there are still clothes here. Let me see and see. The lively and cheerful world ran over first, and greeted Yanyi and the others. You guys come and have a look too. I like a lot of styles here. Yanyi, Otome and the others also ran over after hearing the words, and in the end, even Yazisaya and the others ran over to snatch the clothes. Naruto stood aside and felt that he had nothing to do, so he went to the bathroom to find a towel to wipe his body, then went back to the sofa in the bedroom and leaned down, closing his eyes and resting. Although he had been busy all day, he still didn't feel tired due to his physical fitness, just a little sleepy. And just when he was about to fall asleep, Shizuka suddenly came over, holding a cup of steaming boiled water in her hand, handed it to him and smiled. "Naruto, drink some hot water, fortunately there is still electricity here, I found some water and boiled it." Naruto opened his eyes, looked at her with a slight smile, stretched out his hand to take the cup, and drank it in one gulp. Seeing the satisfied smile on her face, he couldn't help but say, "Mr. Shizuka, you've been driving for so long, hurry up. Go wash and rest." "Yeah, I know, but the bathroom is now occupied by them. I'll wash up with Yuko and the others later." Shizuka smiled slightly. Naruto's concern made her feel very comfortable, and she felt a sweet taste. "Okay, you should go in and wash them when they come out. Although there are no men's clothes here, I'll make you wear girls' clothes first." Shizuka took a set of white clothes from the side. The pajamas looked a little small, but this was already the largest size in the room. Naruto shook his head helplessly, and then he had no choice but to nod in agreement. After continuous battles, the blood stains on his body had been wiped carelessly just now, but they were still not completely clear. At this time, there was still a bloody smell on his body. Does not smell good. After a while, Yan Yi, Gui Shin, Sakai, Otome and Mami all ran out after taking a bath. They were wrapped in bath towels and their hair was wet, and they planned to go to another room to change clothes. There was still Shizuka who didn't take a bath. Saya, Yako and Rei were all waiting to go in. But because Naruto was going in to wash, they had to wait outside. Naruto took a quick shower and came out in a few minutes, but after taking a shower, he didn't have pants to wear, and he was naked under him, so he came out wrapped in a towel. Shizuka and the others saw the obvious bulge under the towel under him, and they couldn't help but turn around with some face yuhi, not daring to look at it. Although Naruto was a little embarrassed, he had a thick skin and passed them by pretending not to care. "It's your turn, come in, I just put on my clothes and pants," Naruto said. The girls hurried into the bathroom after hearing this. I didn't think that before. After Naruto came out of the shower, she had short golden hair, tall and straight body, and well-proportioned muscles, exuding an amazing charm, especially Shizuka, who had been in contact with Naruto before. His eyes couldn't help but glance down at him, and his heart jumped up secretly. Seeing that they all went in, Naruto jumped on the only big bed, put on the small pajamas, and lay down, ready to take a good night's sleep. But after laying down, he found that he was not sleepy again, and opened his eyes and thought about things on the bed. At this moment, a small head suddenly stuck out from the bedroom next to him, looked this way, and then trotted to the side of Naruto's big bed. Naruto turned to look at the person coming. It was Gui Shin. I saw her with a mischievous smile on her face at this time, watching Naruto's eyes roll around, and whispered, "Naruto brother, my sister, they let you come over." Huh, Naruto couldn't help but stunned. "Want me to go over? What's the matter?" I don't know either, they asked me to call you, it seems very mysterious." Gui Shin didn't know what to think. A dizzy flash of yuhi flashed across by Nen's little face. Naruto was a little puzzled. "If there is something wrong, can you just tell me not to?" "Oh, you'll know when you go anyway. What are you doing so wordy?" Gui Shin suddenly pulled him, but didn't pull him, so she jumped on the bed and pushed him. "Come on, I'm going to sleep in this big bed." Naruto felt a little strange, but he had no choice but to laugh bitterly, so he got out of bed and walked to the bedroom where Yanyi Mami and the others were, and muttered, "Aren't they supposed to go to bed now? What's the matter? It's still mysterious." Opening the door, Naruto walked in. The room was pitch black. Naruto was stunned. In the darkness, he suddenly saw several shadows hiding behind the door. As soon as he came in, he suddenly felt a softness behind him. A soft and tender body hugged her tightly, her arms hugged her waist tightly, and she refused to let go. Naruto knew who it was without thinking about this familiar feeling. After he realized it, he turned around and hugged him, smiling, "Mommy, what's wrong? And, what are you all going to do?" Although the lights were turned off in the room, with Naruto's vision, he could easily see Yanyi, Otome, and the three of the world standing by the door, all looking at him with strange expressions. He was puzzled. Moreover, at this time, several of them were only wearing some close-fitting underwear. Although they could not see clearly in the dark, it also made Naruto feel a little fragrant. Naruto, how can you see us?" At this time, after hearing Naruto's words, Otome exclaimed. Naruto smiled, stretched out his hand and pressed the switch on the top, turned on the light in the room, looked at them and said, "What are you doing without a good rest?" Mommy left Naruto's arms, and Yanyi and the others looked at each other, and suddenly several girls came up and grabbed Naruto's arm, pressing him to sit on the bed in the bedroom. Then, Mommy, Otome, Yanyi, all stood in front of him, staring at him intently. With this look, Naruto suddenly felt a little bad in his heart. Chapter 484 Cute Otome. On the other hand, the world was sitting on the side very depressed, bowing his head slightly, as if he had been hit. At this time, Mommy, the oldest of the three, spoke first. "Naruto, we have a lot of questions to ask you. How about you answer truthfully?" "What's the problem?" Naruto noticed the threatening gaze of the three girls, and he always felt as if he was about to be cut into pieces. "Humph." The three girls snorted in unison, then looked at each other, and Mommy asked first, "Naruto, have you had any relationship with them?" Naruto was startled, glanced at Yanyi and Otome, and then saw that the expressions on the faces of the two women were very strange. Yanyi was more angry, and Otome was a little gloating. Seeing that he didn't answer, Mommy suddenly said helplessly, "I really can't do anything about you. You know, now that I and Yanyi already know each other, what are you going to do?" After listening to Mammy's words, Naruto smiled wryly. In fact, he already knew in his heart that once he brought these girls together, they would definitely know each other's affairs, and his colleagues would definitely know about the N-boats. However, this kind of thing seems normal to him. He usually doesn't say it just because he is concerned about the feelings of the girls. Now that they all know it, he doesn't have to hide it anymore. So he raised his head and asked back, "Since you all know, what do you want me to do with it?" Naruto, how can you say such irresponsible words? We are girls. Of course, this kind of thing is up to you to make a decision. Mommy said dissatisfied. Yanyi also nodded. A pair of black and bright eyes stared at him tightly, waiting for his answer. Naruto spread his hands helplessly. "If I said I would be fully responsible for you, what do you think?" When the three women heard this, they were all stunned. This is a monogamous society. How could this guy say such a thing? Although this society is a very open society, even if you have had relationships with many women, in the end, you only need to decide to be with a woman you love deeply. But now, Naruto actually said that he wants to get all of them. The world sitting on the other side shook slightly and looked at Naruto. After Naruto said these words, he saw the three girls staring at him in shock, and he sighed helplessly. "I don't want to hurt any cute girl. To you, I am no one can give up." The three women's bodies trembled slightly. Suddenly, Otome laughed and said, "I think Naruto is doing the right thing. Don't be so serious, everyone. I am willing to follow Naruto, even if he has a lot of women at the same time." She the first to run over and sit in Naruto's arms. Yuji looked at Naruto with a dazed expression. Mommy and Kotoba stared at Otome in astonishment. "Otome, how can you do this? You traitor!" Mommy cried. "Well, I think it's normal. I'm already very satisfied to be favored by Naruto, but I never thought about monopolizing him. I was really nervous before Naruto made his statement just now." "Well, it's all right now. Naruto won't give up on us, and of course I won't leave him." "That's great." Otome hugged Naruto's neck, and put her soft lips together and kissed him on the cheek. Mommy stretched out her hand and covered her forehead. Yan Yi was trembling with anger, and she was speechless when she saw Otome. She had been bullied by Otome before, so I didn't have a good impression of her. After learning that Naruto had actually done H with her, I was almost pissed off. Now I see that Otome is so shameless. Immediately, there was an urge to pounce on her and push her away. However, thinking about everyone's journey along the way, it's really not easy to coexist in this world full of crises and disasters, and she felt bitter in her heart. Suddenly, he also ran into Naruto's arms, hugged his waist all of a sudden, and stared at Otome in dissatisfaction. Naruto is my boyfriend. I forgive you for what happened before. This time I will never I'll give it to you again. Otome smiled and said, it's up to you to decide. Naruto has already said it, we can't escape. Humph, I won't compromise. Yan Yi raised his mouth in dissatisfaction, stretched out his jade arm and hugged Naruto's neck and said, Naruto, are you only my boyfriend? Naruto laughed dryly, and Otome suddenly turned cold. Yan Yi, how can you be so selfish? Naruto has already promised this to share with us, why do you have to be exclusive? You can't be so selfish. After Naruto listened to it, I felt that Otome was really cute. It feels really good to have such a girl who speaks for herself. However, seeing Yan Yi's sad look on the verge of crying, he felt a little too big. At this moment, Mommy, who was standing on the side with her mouth open, finally reacted. She pulled Yan Yi and Otome away from Naruto with a smile and angrily hugged her chest with both hands and said, you too. This is too much, right? It was clearly stated that it was to be decided by Naruto. Otome, you traitor, become Naruto's slave. And Yan Yi, how can you pester Naruto like this? Quote. How can I have it? It's obviously Naruto being too bad, but I can't help but want to get all of us. Yan Yi stomped his feet and said. Otome laughed and retorted, even if I become Naruto's slave, I am willing. I believe Naruto will not abuse me, haha. Mommy was speechless. For a while, everyone was at a deadlock. At this moment, Otome took advantage of Yan Yi and Mammy's inattentiveness, and suddenly pushed the two of them onto the bed from behind them. What? The two girls let out a soft cry. Hey, what are you doing, traitor? Damn it, don't press me. While entangled with the two women, Otome looked back at Naruto, winked at him, and then whispered in the ears of the two women, as a slave to Lord Naruto, I can help the master fulfill his wishes. Oh. On the other side, the world looked at it in shock. Just now, she heard that the three of them had had a relationship with Naruto, and she felt a lot of loss and depression. Later, she heard that they would call Naruto over to give an explanation. She originally thought that Naruto would make a choice. Well, I didn't expect it to be like this now. Chapter 485 Body Cool is really cool. Ah hey, Otome, what are you doing? Yan Yi exclaimed, suddenly feeling that the pajamas on his body were stripped off, revealing only the close-fitting hood, panties and pants inside. The same is true for Mommy. Otome moved quickly and pulled off her pajamas. In this way, the two women were only left with one piece of underwear on their bodies, with snow-white skin and slender thighs. The proudly erect breasts, and the occasional spring, light that they showed as they struggled. All this made Naruto on the side look a little unbearable. Naruto, seeing that he was still sitting there, Otome called him quickly, indicating that it was time for him to play. Naruto, who was startled by Otome's bold behavior, suddenly had a bold idea in his heart. He smiled at Otome and nodded to her. Both of them understood. Otome caught it first. Mommy, who was struggling, then let go of Yan Yi. Just when Yan Yi wanted to get up, Naruto suddenly pressed down and pushed her back onto the bed. The whole bed shook slightly, and Yan Yi was immediately pressed down by him. Naruto, what are you doing? Yan Yi raised Yuhi's face, and she, who was pressed down by Naruto, asked about the strong masculine aura on him, and immediately felt a sense of urgency. All soft feeling. And Mommy stared at Naruto and Yan Yi with wide eyes. Otome smiled softly in her ear, it's time for Naruto and Yan Yi. It's your turn next. Mommy was startled, and then a Yuhi dizzy appeared on her jade face. I saw Naruto lowered his head to hold Yan Yi's soft lips, and his hands slid all the way to the mysterious triangle area along her raised jade, Nufeng. Gently pulling on the Yuhi-colored trousers, his fingers slid in directly along the seam. Yan Yi let out a soft cry, her slender legs clenched tightly, and she murmured as if she was about to say something, but she was blocked by Naruto, and she couldn't break free. Full of Yuhi halo, embarrassed and angry. When did Naruto become so bad? How to treat yourself like this in front of others? How nasty. But what is the feeling that pours out of his body? Very strange. The fingers kept poking in the gap between Yan Yi's legs, and after a while, the gurgling sound of water came out. The shameful sound and pleasure made the skin of Yan Yi's whole body wet with embarrassment. Mommy looked at the scene in front of her. Her body was being held by Otome. She had forgotten to struggle, but her pretty face was covered with Yuhi dizziness. Naruto's fingers were moving in Yan Yi. She seemed to feel it too, the feeling of her body being fiddled with, and unconsciously, the pants under her were slightly soaked. At this moment, a small hand suddenly slid across Mammy's lower abdomen, and suddenly inserted into Mammy's white trousers. Ah! With a soft cry, Mammy's whole body was shaken. She quickly reached out to stop Otome's little hand, but the pleasure of being fiddled with by Otome under her body actually made her feel weak. A feeling of wow, hate. Mammy's body couldn't help twisting. She wanted to break free of Otome, but her soft body was powerless to resist. At this time, Naruto had already taken off Yan Yi's trousers and glanced under her. It was already muddy. Naruto, who was already swollen and painful, immediately removed his clothes, took out Shao Naruto, stretched out Yan Yi's two long legs, straightened his body, and entered deeply. Yan Yi's small mouth opened suddenly, her neck was thrown back sharply, her throat gasped for a while, and the magnificent Yuhi dizziness rushed to her body along her pretty face, spreading slowly. A sweet moan came from her throat. Yan Yi quickly closed her mouth again, and did not dare to look around her eyes. After being deeply entered by Naruto, her whole body trembled. The familiar sense of fulfillment made her feel completely silent. How can this be? Mommy covered her mouth, widened her eyes and looked at Yan Yi, who was comfortably pressed by Naruto under her body, with disbelief on her face. Otome is also hot all over. Her face is wet Yuhi, her body has long been wet. Watching Naruto enter Yan Yi's body, she also has a kind of desire to be entered by him, but she knows that at this time, she must help Naruto solve the words Yi and Mommy were both, so even though she wanted it very much at this time, she was still seriously restraining Mommy and not letting her get up. However, at this time, I am afraid that even if Mommy is let go, she will not get up, right? Naruto. Yan Yi's little hand grabbed Naruto's arm. Silver Kiba bit her lower lip, trying her best not to make a sound, but with Naruto's deep and shallow movements, she froze. Still unable to hold back, he opened his small mouth and let out a seductive, charming, groaning groan. Seeing that Yan Yi has entered the state so quickly, and the resentment that he had when he was jealous was completely gone, Naruto was surprised and very happy at the same time. It seems that when a woman is uncomfortable, she has to find a way to let it go. She feels great physically. At this time, the world sitting on the side did not know when she had already lay down. Her mouth was also slightly tender, panting, and Yuhi was dizzy. She had never seen such a scene before. At this time, she was shocked and ashamed. What should she do? She could only stare blankly at this scene, and before she knew it, her little hand had already touched her chest. Ah! After a while, an extremely high-pitched Zhao Chan sounded in the room. Yan Yi, who was pressed down by Naruto, tensed up suddenly, a pair of snow-white round thighs tightly wrapped around Naruto's waist, and the secret passage between her legs suddenly contracted and twitched. Lost. Yan Yi opened his mouth and bit his little hand, her beautiful eyes closed tightly into a high altitude. Tide. Naruto had not yet reached the peak of the jet, but seeing how she was already unbearable, he had to let go of her and looked at Otome and Mommy who were hugging by the side. The two women couldn't help but tremble. The next moment, Otome suddenly pushed Mami's trousers to the crook of her calf and said to Naruto, "Quick, there are more here." Naruto glanced at Mami, and the flood had already flooded, and the water had already flowed down his thighs onto the sheets. He smiled, grabbed Mami's white and tender feet, gently pulled her body, and pulled her. His legs were slammed into her chest, and Naruto straightened up and inserted it into the slightly raised gap with a puff. Chapter 486 The World Joins. "Oh, bad Naruto," Mami cried out with a long groan. Her whole body trembled, and the next moment, she was so sensitive that she tensed up and raised her neck with a desperate shaking. Suddenly entered the high tide. Naruto felt the squeezing and squirming coming from her, and he almost cried out in comfort. At this time, Otome on the side couldn't bear it anymore. She was bold and took off all the clothes on her body. It was slightly crisp, and her breasts were only B-cup size. You looked a little inferior in front of their huge breasts, but she still tried her best to hug Naruto from behind, and her chest tightly pressed against Naruto's back. "Naruto, I can't stand it anymore." Otome stretched out her tongue and slid quietly on Naruto's back. The itchy feeling made Naruto tremble all over his body, and his body was as hard as golden iron, pressing deep into Mami's body, directly to the uterus. "Okay, it's so hot." After Mami madly vented, she lay weakly under Naruto and panted. Otome was lying on Naruto's back, and Otome's pair of jade hands were restlessly stroking around, touching Naruto's muscles, and occasionally fiddling with Mami's big breasts under her body. While Mami was lying on the bed, her legs were lifted high above her head, and she could only bear the impact of Naruto motionless. "No, it can't be done. Naruto, I want it, I want to go." After a while, Mami couldn't stand the excitement, and she opened her mouth and screamed. Yanyi on the side was still high, and in the aftertaste of the tide, Yuhi closed his eyes and dazed and listened to Zhao on the side, gasping and moaning. For a time, the house was extremely promiscuous and chaotic. At this time, the four of them, Saya, Shizuka, and Rei, who had finished taking a bath in the bathroom, suddenly found that there were not enough towels in the bathroom. The towels used by Yanye Mami and the others were still in theirs. In the room. "What should I do? How can we go out without bath towels?" Shay became anxious. "Well, it's all my fault. I didn't have enough bath towels ready." Shizuka bit her fingers with a distressed look. "I think we'd better let Naruto help you with it," Lee said helplessly. He's probably already asleep now, we can't disturb him." Shizuka shook her head. "But we won't be able to get out if we go on like this." Since he's asleep, can't we go out in an open and honest way?" Yuzi suddenly suggested. The other three girls couldn't help but be stunned. That's right. Ouch. Why didn't I think of that?" Shay suddenly cried out in annoyance. They all laughed. "Hey, I'm a genius. You can't laugh at me," Saya shouted in dissatisfaction. Yes, you are a genius." Shizuka smiled and waved her hand. "Should we go out now?" "Humph." Saya snorted and suddenly said, "Usually a strong man like Naruto has very keen senses. I think if we go out, it will definitely wake him up. Then we won't be seen. Is it?" "Well, I think you're just making excuses for your mistake just now, right?" Lee hugged her chest and shook her head helplessly. "What? Are you questioning my genius mind?" Okay, stop arguing. I think everyone should think about how to get out now." Shizuka hurried up to persuade. "Well, it's very simple, just send someone out to find the world and they'll get the towel back," Shay said. "Who's going to send it?" In the room, Mami had lost all strength like Yanyi, and at this time, it was Otome who was on Naruto. Although Otome's figure is far from comparable to Mami and Yanyi, the way she sits on Naruto and keeps exercising still brings Naruto a very strong sense of comfort. When she was with Mami and Yanyi before, it was all Naruto moving, and this time Otome, who was very considerate of him, told Naruto to lie down and not move, and she moved up and down on her own initiative. In the sound of fluttering, Mami's body swayed up and down, and every time she sank, Naruto's giant body would push deeply into her body, giving her a trembling pleasure. At this time, the world on the other side couldn't bear it anymore. She put one hand in her trousers and rubbed it desperately. She looked at Naruto. Her face was full of Yuhi's dizziness and resentment. Otome, who was desperately moving up and down, turned her head to look at the world, and couldn't help but be slightly stunned. It was only then that I noticed that the three of them were here to enjoy themselves, but they didn't care about the feelings of the world. It's just that Otome, who was enjoying herself, couldn't take care of that much anymore. Now, her whole body felt like she was about to fly into the clouds, and her pretty buttocks suddenly moved up and down rapidly. Seeing her sweaty appearance, Naruto stretched out his hand to hold her slender waist, and his warm big hand supported her body, and he moved quickly. Ah, Naruto-sama, I'm going to. Otome suddenly felt that the speed below accelerated, and the bursts of rush of pleasure that brought her instantly drowned her in it. With a long squeak, Otome's whole body leaned back, trembling. She was caught in the high tide, and the next moment she fell into Naruto's arms. Naruto hugged her gently, kissed her lips slowly, and whispered into her ear, "Thank you, Otome." Otome heard a slight movement on her face, and a smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. After a while, Otome gained a bit of strength, slowly got up from Naruto, walked to the edge of the world, and suddenly smiled. "World, how is it? Do you want it too?" At this moment in the world, a hand was still stuck in her trousers, and she quickly pulled it out when she said it, but her hands were already full of sticky liquid. Her pink face suddenly turned purple, and she hesitated. She wanted to say something, but Otome didn't listen to her. She pulled her up and came to Naruto's side. "Naruto-sama, you must not be satisfied yet, let her satisfy you." Otome pushed the world towards Naruto with a smile, and the completely overwhelmed world fell on Naruto, panicking. Screamed softly. "World, I heard that you haven't had sex with Naruto just now. Since you want it so much, let Naruto have sex with you now," Otome said, and reached out to untie it. Clothes on the world. Chapter 487 Release in Despair. It hurts, it hurts. Naruto entered gently. The world bit Kiba's face and Yuhi was dazed and endured, feeling the feeling of being stretched and torn under him, and his whole body trembled. "Wow, I didn't expect this to be your first time in the world." Otome couldn't help but exclaimed when she saw this scene. The world now has no time to listen to Otome's words, because the whole person was suppressed by Naruto, and the bottom was stretched open. The tearing pain and the wonderful sense of fulfillment left her brain blank. Naruto gently kissed the tears from the corner of World's eyes, and after entering, he stopped moving. He asked softly, "If you slow down, I'll move." The world groaned and groaned. Without speaking, her whole face was buried in Naruto's arms. She, who had always been cheerful before, was actually broken in front of Otome, Yanba and Mami. This feeling of embarrassment, coupled with the pleasure and pain from her body, made her unable to speak at all. Otome watched the world with her eyes tightly closed and didn't dare to look around. She couldn't help laughing, and when she saw that the world's chest was only about the same size as hers, she finally felt comforted in her heart. "World, you are so small here." Otome stretched out her hand to catch the upright bud on World's chest, quietly poking and fiddling. "Ah, Otome, what are you doing?" The world's body twisted slightly under Otome's little hand. At this time, Naruto also moved slightly. Seeing that the world's reaction was not very intense, he started to move slowly. Because the world had already done enough lubrication work before, and now it is full of water, although it hurt a little when the first piercing, but after a while, when she got used to the size of Naruto, plus it was enough it's wet, so now the world is not painful when Naruto moves, but there is a wonderful itching feeling. Unable to help, she opened her small mouth and let out a soft cry. Her voice was clear and sweet, holding Naruto's neck with both hands, and she also moved slightly to cooperate with Naruto. Otome felt that her body was getting hot again. She had just been made high by Naruto, and she couldn't hold it anymore. She turned to look at Yanyi and Mami, but found that they also had expressions of unbearable resentment. Really, Naruto is so bad, he actually messed with us altogether. Mommy cried out in dissatisfaction. Yanyi raised his mouth and looked at him angrily. Yeah, to actually take it and pull the world down. The four of us girls were made like this by him, it's really cool to him. Otome giggled and said, all right, you two just screamed so badly. Naruto is actually working really hard, so be considerate of him. When Otome said this, Yanyi and Mommy immediately turned their faces to Yuhi, and turned around in shame. They couldn't help thinking of the scene where Naruto moaned and moaned wantonly, and their bodies became slightly hot. I don't know why, looking at the scene in front of me, Yanyi and Mommy suddenly felt a very exciting feeling. Degenerate, promiscuous, and chaotic, a passionate and romantic scene was staged in this room. The sound here was blocked and could not be transmitted to the master bedroom, and Gui Shin was still sleeping soundly on the bed. But at this time, a figure suddenly came out of the bathroom and appeared in the master bedroom. Seeing Gui Shin lying on the bed, he couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Where's Naruto? Where did he go? The naked Shizuka carefully held the huge breasts that surpassed the H-cup on her chest, and passed through the master bedroom to the door where Yanyi and the others were. Knocked gently on the door. At this time, the 5 Jungwon people who were fighting in the room were lying on the bed and taking turns sitting in love with Naruto. How could they notice the slight knock on the door? Shizuka was a little puzzled. She reached out and twisted the door handle, only to find that it was locked from the inside. She felt even more strange. These students, why did you lock the door? I don't know what you're doing, she murmured, approaching the door, and suddenly heard a strange sound coming from the door. Ah, Naruto, give it to me, I want it. Well, and me, why is this? I'm so partial. Yes, I'm going. No. Well, hurry up. Immediately afterwards, all kinds of moans and lustful words came into Shizuka's ears. Shizuka's body softened, and she fell directly on the ground at the door. She stared blankly at the closed door in front of her, as if she saw the unbearable pictures inside, and her face was full of incredible expressions. After a long time, she slowly stood up, but found that her legs were all soft and fell, and the bottom was wet. It's so embarrassing, why am I reacting like this? I can't blame myself for this, it's all because of the bad students inside. Why are you doing that at this time? Also, why are Mommy Yanba and the others doing that kind of thing with Naruto? Shizuka was in a mess in her head, and she didn't know what to do. She returned to the bathroom in a daze, closed the door, and Yuhi's heart was beating on her face. Yazi, Saya and Lee and the others saw that teacher Shizuka had gone for a long time before coming back. They thought they would bring back the bath towel, but she didn't expect her to be empty-handed. Teacher Shizuka, where's the towel? Lee asked. After Shizuka heard the words, she came back to her senses, with a look of embarrassment on her face, and hesitantly said, I forgot. What? The 3 girls looked at each other, feeling incredible. How could they forget this? Nonsense. Saya stood up and said, what's going on with Shizuka-sensei? This, that. Shizuka really couldn't tell the matter. She was forced to ask her face for a while. Yuhi was speechless. The 3 of them looked very strange. There was no other way. After the 3 of them looked at each other, Saya straightened the E-cup, breasts, and said, it seems that I should go. Open. She also went out. Like Shizuka, she came back immediately after going out, a jade face that rose even more Yuhi than Shizuka, and at the same time she looked very angry. What's wrong? What happened? Yazi and Lee were even more puzzled. Why didn't you get the towel back? Shay shouted angrily, damn. How can I get it under such circumstances? It's so outrageous. Chapter 488 Girl Figure. Rei and Yuko looked at each other and felt that something was wrong. The 2 narrowed their eyes slightly, staring at Shizuka and Saya with a dangerous look. Come on, what the hell happened to you? Why are you procrastinating with a bath towel? Spoke out about Naruto doing that kind of in Yanya's room. After speaking, Yazi and Lee were stunned. Both of them also made Yuhi's face, and Lee murmured, "No wonder, but, I don't think Naruto is such a person, how can he do such Anyway, we really heard it. If you don't believe it, just listen to it yourself," Shay said. That's the case. In that case, why are we staying here? If Naruto is in the room, why don't we just go back and put on our clothes? Shizuka said suddenly. Yako, Saya, Miyamoto Ray. Saya patted his head. Ah. Damn it. It's all Naruto's fault. Doing such a shameful thing has made us all confused. Yazi covered his forehead and sighed, "Let's go out first." Opening the door, the four carefully walked out one after another and came to the master bedroom. Yazi and Lee saw Gui Shin, who was sleeping soundly, and Li Wei whispered, "Fortunately, this little girl hasn't participated yet." Shizuka and the others looked at each other and smiled bitterly. Suddenly, the bedroom door of the opposite Yanyi's room suddenly clicked softly, and Naruto, who was sorting out his pajamas, came out contentedly. Then, he met four naked girls. After Naruto broke the world, Otom Yanyi Mami and the three also went out of their way, and kept asking Naruto for it. Of course Naruto could not ask for such a good thing. He sat in love with four girls all at once. He really had never experienced it. As a result, in the rounds of battles, the atmosphere turned out to be higher, which made Shizuka and Saya hear the unbearable voice. At this time, just after he put all four girls on the ground, he sprayed himself several times before he came out comfortably. It just happened unexpectedly. At this time, Naruto stared at the four girls who were even hotter than Yanyi and the others in the room, unable to look away. Screamed. It was Lee and Shay. The two hurriedly jumped onto Gui Shin's big bed, and immediately got into the quilt. Because of the sudden movement, Gui Shin was woken up. Yazi was relatively calm, but she still had a jaded face, holding her chest with one hand and covering her lower body with the other, looking at Naruto awkwardly. Shizuka is similar, but it's not that she doesn't want to hide, but she hasn't reacted yet. At this time, she is staring blankly at Naruto, holding her big breasts with both hands, but she doesn't know how to cover it. Naruto couldn't calm down immediately. He had just come out of Yanyi and the others' room, and he was satisfied, and there was a heat in his lower abdomen. What's the matter? Sister Lee and Sister Saya, how did you come to my bed? At this time, Gui Shin, who woke up, rubbed her eyes and saw two people beside her. A person who got into his bed, said something strange. Ray and Saya hid under the quilt, glaring at Naruto with fiery faces. It was only then that Gui Shin noticed that there were still two people standing in the room, with tender bodies. Then, she saw Naruto standing opposite them. "Brother Naruto," Gui Shin called out, but found that the current atmosphere was a little weird. And Gui Shin's voice finally reminded Naruto. Naruto realized that something was wrong. He turned around quickly, and laughed dryly. "I'm sorry everyone, I didn't see anything, haha, I'll leave it to you here, I go to another room to sleep." After he finished speaking, he immediately slid away and walked towards the room where the girls and the others were supposed to rest. At this moment, the voice of a scorpion suddenly came from behind. "Remember to help us take out all the clothes later." Naruto was stunned, nodded and hurriedly opened the door and walked into the room. Closing the door, the previous images still remained in his mind. Saya, Yako, Shizuka, Ray. Although I usually think that their figures are very proud, I didn't expect to be amazing when they don't wear clothes. Although it was only a quick glance, with Naruto's eyesight, of course, he didn't see nothing. On the contrary, he had seen them all clearly. In comparison, among the four of them, the one with the most amazing figure is Teacher Shizuka. She is indeed a mature woman, and her chest is so big that even Naruto can't imagine it. Although it has been estimated before, it is only now. When I actually saw it, I felt huge and dazzling. It is definitely beyond the H-cup or more. Naruto felt that his hands must be unable to hold. Moreover, Shizuka, who has such big breasts, doesn't seem to sag at all, it's really tempting, people. And next to him is Saya. I didn't expect this proud and talented girl to have a bamboo shoot-shaped chest. And it is second only to Shizuka-sensei's existence. Although Naruto has had a relationship with many girls, he has never seen such an unexpected girl. After Saya, it is Lee, and Fujimi College is worthy of being an aristocratic college. The girls' bodies are so full, and compared with Saya, it is only a little bit worse. What is comforting is that Yako's figure looks just right, a perfect figure in Naruto's eyes. Although her D-cup breasts are not as good as those of the other three, they match her tall figure and slender waist. As well as the slender thighs, all this looks extremely harmonious and natural, and it can be said that she is a girl who practices kendo. Naruto, who had already lost his mind, recovered after a while. However, when he saw the underwear, and pants of various colors and sizes on the bed, he immediately felt helpless. Holding these clothes, when Naruto came to the master bedroom again, he found that the four daughters and Gui Shin were all under the covers, and they all seemed to be asleep with their eyes closed. However, Naruto could tell at a glance that they were deliberately pretending to be asleep for fear of embarrassment. Shaking his head and slightly relieved, Naruto returned to the room again and lay on the bed. Although he and Yanyi were a little tired and wanted to rest, the tragedy was that he found that he couldn't calm down at all. I closed my eyes and my mind was full of those pictures from before. Chapter 489 How to Grow Chakra. After a while, Naruto slowly calmed down and fell asleep. Suddenly, he regained consciousness, and a large piece of light appeared in front of him. The sky was no longer dark, and the earth was no longer a dead body, but full of the fragrance of birds and flowers. Front, a beautiful figure stood there quietly, with her back to him, her long fiery yuhi-colored hair hanging down to her waist. At this moment, her back looked so peaceful and natural. Naruto was slightly taken aback, he actually came to the consciousness space. Since the chakra stopped flowing for no reason, he has hardly visited this place again, and did not expect to come unintentionally at this time. That figure, Naruto knew without thinking, was Uzumaki Kina. Did you call me here? Naruto walked over slowly, and Kina turned around with a gentle smile on her white face. Yeah, Naruto, I'm so bored here recently, why can't I see the outside world anymore? It seems that something is wrong with the chakra in your body, and even my chakra has been imprisoned. What? She said directly. Naruto shook his head and smiled bitterly. Yeah, I'm in another world now. I'm no longer in the ninja world, and the power in my body has been imprisoned as you said. I don't know if this is because the laws of this world are resisting me. All in all, bad luck. Kainai stretched out his hand to make a slight seal, and then frowned slightly. Hey, it's still not good. You talked about a new world, what kind of world is it? Also, why did you leave the ninja world? Yes, is it through time-space ninjutsu? These days I have been bored and can't see the outside. It's so boring, son, you better talk to me. She stepped forward and grabbed Naruto's hand, and the two sat on the green grass together, looking at the blue sky. Although all of this is just a world created by Naruto's consciousness, it seems that this place has really become a pure land in Naruto's heart. The former Kyuubi, Nine Tails, is no longer there, but replaced by a cheap mother, Kinai. The two lay down on the spot, and Kainai smiled lightly. I haven't chatted with you for a long time. I finally pulled you in today. Tell me about this new world. Naruto turned his head and glanced at her. Seeing that she was in high spirits, he had to talk to her roughly, starting with how he came to this world, talking about school life in this world, and what friends did you make at school. Listening to Naruto's vivid explanation, the expression on Kina's face was also very interested, and she sighed in surprise. When she heard something interesting, she would giggle and laugh. When she heard that he was interacting with several girls at the same time. Sometimes, he would laugh and scold again. Naruto spread his hands helplessly. Anyway, I don't want to hurt any good girl who likes me. As long as I can handle the relationship between everyone, how about a little bit of effort? In this regard, Chennai felt angry and laughed. raised her hand and beat him. "You bastard, you are more attractive than your father." She didn't know what to think, and her face flashed a faint Yuhi dizziness. Said angrily, "In addition to those girls in the ninja world, I'm afraid you can't take care of it now, right?" Naruto laughed dryly and touched his nose. "Hey, you bastard." Kainai covered her smooth forehead, but her face was helpless. Next, the two continued to chat for a while, and Naruto only told her some interesting and happy things, and she didn't tell her that the world began to collapse. Seeing her alone in the consciousness space is already so dull, and if you have to worry about the outside world, Naruto really can't bear it. When exiting the consciousness space, Chennai looked reluctant and lost. Consciousness slowly returned. This time, Naruto slept directly from early morning to evening. When he woke up and walked out of the room, he found that everyone else was still sleeping. He didn't bother everyone, came to the balcony, sat cross-legged and entered a state of cultivation. At this time, it was in the evening, and the setting sun slowly fell on the horizon of the city, casting a golden brilliance on the city full of gunpowder smoke. Just as he continued to refine the chakra, he suddenly noticed that there was only a trace of chakra, but at this time it actually increased. Moreover, the chakra was actually changed with yin and yang attributes, which was extremely pure. Naturally, this chakra is more harmonious than the chakra in his own body. Seeing this scene, Naruto couldn't help but fall into contemplation. What the hell is going on? I remember that when I first produced chakra, it seemed to be after having sex with mommy, and after that, it seemed that every chakra progress was after finishing with Otom and Yanyi. Do love enhance chakra? That's not right. When I lived with mommy, I used to do it with her often, but since the first time, I haven't had such an effect after doing it. Thinking of this, Naruto couldn't help but be stunned for a while. No, does it have to be done with a virgin to have such an effect? Well, but if this is the case, with this level of chakra growth, how many virgins must be broken? Naruto felt a pain in the ass just thinking about it. However, if this guess is true, it can be regarded as a way to restore chakra, and these chakras with changes in yin and yang attributes seem to be more handy than before. Sitting on the balcony, he entered a state of cultivation, but the thoughts in his head had unknowingly flew to the girls in the room. Maybe, you can really find a chance to try it. Find a way to verify it again. He thought quietly in his heart. Time passed slowly, and at this moment, someone in the room behind him seemed to wake up, and an unconscious murmur entered Naruto's ears. Then, a figure walked to the balcony. However, the other party didn't seem to notice Naruto, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, so he just walked over with his head raised. Just as Naruto was about to stand up, he found that the other party's calf bumped on his body. Oops! A coquettish cry sounded. The other party accidentally tripped over, and immediately fell out of the balcony when he felt unsteady. Naruto couldn't help being shocked when he saw this. He stood up with a brush, stretched out his hand to fish, and quickly carried her back. However, it was a coincidence that because Naruto pulled her too quickly, the pajamas buttons on the other party's body were not fully buttoned. When Naruto pulled her into his arms, the pajamas buttons suddenly broke. Now, with a bang, a whole piece of snow-white skin was exposed in front of my eyes. Chapter 490 Teacher Shizuka. She didn't seem to have reacted from the danger just now. At this time, her mouth was slightly soft, and after groaning, she looked up and leaned against Naruto's arms, looking at him motionless. Naruto hurriedly stretched out his hand to help her pull the open pajamas on her body, her old face slightly embarrassed, and said, "Sorry, Shizuka-sensei, I didn't expect you to come to the balcony and trip over you. Are you alright?" Juchuan Shizuka had just woken up, and was still a little confused at this time. She was also frightened by the sudden fall in her mind. It was not until Naruto apologized to her that she came back to her senses and heard Naruto. Then, she hurriedly shook her head. "No, it's okay Naruto, why are you on the balcony?" Then, she looked down at her chest, but found that Naruto's big hand was pressing there, and the two bulging mountains of flesh on her chest couldn't hide it. Only then did she realize that the clothes on her chest had been opened, and the holes were broken. "Ah!" she exclaimed again, and hurriedly reached out and pushed Naruto's big hand away, looking for the button herself. However, after searching for a long time, she found that the buttons on the clothes had already collapsed. Where can they be fastened? Why is this? She then became anxious. Her hands panicked to cover the scenery in front of her chest, but she was sitting in Naruto's arms at the moment. The more flustered she was, the more unable to cover her live, and later on, the pajamas on him were completely messed up and could no longer be covered. Naruto almost had a nosebleed. A beautiful woman was sitting in her arms and adjusting her clothes unconsciously. Doesn't she know that she can stand up and run indoors to change clothes in this situation? Ah, Naruto, you, don't look around. Shizuka didn't know if she was too flustered or didn't wake up. She didn't hide herself for the first time, but she was still in Naruto's arms. He got up, holding his huge breasts that could make a man move, and screamed helplessly. In fact, Naruto really moved the chicken. Before she knew it, the big hand he had just wrapped around Shizuka's waist was completely attached to her smooth belly. And because of her clothes, Naruto's big hand was no longer blocked by the clothes at this time, and it was completely clinging to her jowl. Tender muscles, skin. That, Naruto, your hand, it's so hot. Shizuka only discovered Naruto's big hand at this time, and she twisted her tenderly slightly uncomfortably. Body, want to leave Naruto's palm. However, she found that the more she twisted, the more a warm feeling came out of her body. Naruto laughed dryly and secretly swallowed his saliva. Just as his palm was about to leave her lower abdomen, the brother under him couldn't help but stand upright, and the bulge directly pressed against her plump and full buttocks. Both of them were shocked and looked into each other's eyes. Shizuka's hands that were hurriedly tidying up her clothes suddenly stopped at this moment, and she couldn't help but raise two pretty Yuhi halo on her tender and jade-like face. In those beautiful eyes staring at Naruto, a soft wave suddenly emerged. Naruto, Naruto, she quietly opened her moist cherry lips, her white teeth were looming, and a wet, warm breath sprayed onto Naruto's face. Naruto's body, I don't know when, has already sat down on the corner of the balcony, sitting on the cold floor, holding her warm tender body in both hands, looking at her so seductive and human appearance, can't help but be moved. Can I ask you a question? Shizuka said suddenly. You, speak. Naruto's throat moved slightly, his eyes couldn't help but look at her chest, a pair of white jade hands placed on the two bulging mountains, but they couldn't hide it at all, that snow-white and delicate piece of spring, light. Do you mind, a girl many years older than you? Shizuka's eyes turned slightly away, and Yuhi's dizziness deepened when she said this. Naruto couldn't help but beating in his heart. What did she mean? A girl many years older, isn't this referring to herself? Although he doesn't know how old Mr. Shizuka is, it doesn't look too big, and age is not a hindrance in front of him at all. Teacher Shizuka has already hinted at this level, if Naruto still doesn't understand. The next moment, he suddenly turned his face and slammed her slightly open cherry mouth. Shizuka's body trembled suddenly, her pretty eyes suddenly widened, and she stared blankly at Ming, who was close at hand. People. After being stunned for a few seconds, Shizuka didn't struggle to escape, but silently endured, quietly catered to Naruto, opening her mouth slightly to Naruto's. Wantonly greeted Naruto's tongue into the drill. Naruto kept kissing her lips, her lilac, looking at Yuhi's dizziness that was getting deeper and deeper on her face, and her body that was getting hotter. His hands finally reached out to Teacher Shizuka's clothes. Naruto's hand, covering Teacher Shizuka's shoulder, slid into her clothes, touching her incomparably smooth skin, and slowly, the clothes fell off her shoulders, revealing the round and smooth shoulders, slender, white and tender. The jade arm, and the two mountains of meat that were heavily pressing on Naruto's chest. His hands kept sliding on Teacher Shizuka's body, causing her body to tremble slightly. After a long time, he finally left the teacher's soft lips and kissed down her slender neck inch by inch. In the end, his mouth stopped on the bulging chest, and he looked at Shizuka, who was already in fascination, and in the chaos, he swallowed, and stopped her acacia anko. Shizuka-sensei trembled, and there was an unconscious moan and groan from her mouth. Naruto, you haven't answered me yet. Shizuka raised her head slightly, her head pale yellow. The long colored hair was casually scattered behind her, and it swayed slightly as she shook. The sensitive part of her chest was taken into Naruto's mouth, and an electric current-like feeling made her almost agitated. Naruto then raised his head and looked at her, holding her soft jade back in one hand and Yuhi's pretty face in the other, and said softly, "Teacher Shizuka, let me answer you with my actions." As he said that, his hand suddenly slipped into her valley flowers. Shizuka shrank suddenly, her round and tender thighs couldn't help but clenched, but soon relaxed again, a little bit, and then tightly wrapped around Naruto's waist. Chapter 491 New Chakra. On the balcony, the infinite spring, the light, the distant sky, the sunset Yuhi, just like the pretty face of Shizuka at this time, and the rose blooming under her body. Being deeply entered, Teacher Shizuka's pretty face turned pale, but soon she bit Silver Kiba again, looked at Naruto quietly, and closed her eyes again. Naruto couldn't help being a little surprised. He didn't expect that Shizuka, who had become a teacher, was still a virgin. Feeling the tightness below her, Naruto couldn't even suspect that it was an illusion. "Teacher Shizuka," Naruto called to her. Naruto, please don't call me, teacher. Can you call me Shizuka?" Shizuka closed her beautiful eyes, her face paled slightly and then flooded again. There was a strong Yuhi tide, and he said softly, "What's wrong?" Naruto couldn't help asking, but he felt that when he called her teacher, there was a special excitement in his heart, and he didn't want to change his words for a while. "Well, because if you call it like that, yes, it will be very embarrassing." Shizuka opened her eyes, full of spring water, looked at Naruto and said, Am I someone who doesn't know? What about the shameful teacher? To actually do it with the students, love." Naruto chuckled. "I don't think so. It's normal for men and women to do things they like to do together, and, no matter who you are, Shizuka-sensei, you will be my woman in the future, and I will protect it with my life." "Oh you. Well, Naruto, would you really accept an old woman like me?" Shizuka was very moved, but she still cared about her age. After all, she was already 27 years old, but she was still like Naruto. Students have a relationship, how should everyone see themselves in the future? However, she thought about it again, the world is about to collapse, who would care about such a thing? Moreover, I have never been in such close contact with a man, and now I have finally handed over my virginity, which is a breakthrough. And even if two people have sex, they don't necessarily have to be together. Now that they are so open, this can be regarded as a spur of the moment for the two of them. Naruto kissed her lightly, and said with a chuckle, "Mr. Shizuka is so beautiful, so maybe she's an old woman." Hearing him praise her for being beautiful, Shizuka was overjoyed. Although she still felt that there was no possibility between herself and Naruto, the two of them making love together like this was just an indulgence, but she could hear his sweet words, which was enough to make her feel happy. Naruto's next attack quickly made Shizuka forget everything, because after the slight tingling, the feeling was really too comfortable. She had never found out that after a man's things entered her body, it would bring her such a happy feeling. It can be said that this feeling is not an exaggeration to ascend to heaven. No wonder now men and women like to get tired of doing things together. It turns out that this kind of thing can really degenerate people. Shizuka let out a moan and groaned. The pair of huge meat mountains in front of her chest swayed constantly, slamming into Naruto's chest from time to time, causing waves after waves. And Naruto is constantly pumping back and forth. When I was inserting, I suddenly had a strange idea in my heart. Since I had already guessed that having sex with a virgin, love can improve the chakra in my body, why not do it while cultivating it this time? Love it. As soon as he thought of it, Naruto hugged Shizuka tightly with both hands and let her sit on his lap, while he kept hitting her secret path under him, bringing out bursts of cheerful sounds of water, and this at the same time, the only trace of chakra in his body began to run wildly, trying his best to extract the energy in his body. He found that whenever the bursts of pleasure hit, the mental energy generated could directly capture the physical energy in the original chakras in the body, and reform a special chakra, that is, chakra with yin and yang attributes. When he was shocked, when he captured the spiritual energy generated by the pleasure, there was a magical energy coming from the joint of the two, which merged with the chakra in the body, which further contributed to Naruto's body. Chakra growth. This feeling, it's a bit like the state of cultivating the power of nature. In the Hokage world, in addition to cultivating his own chakra, he can also absorb the power of nature into his body and combine with his own chakra to fight. The effect achieved is several times stronger than usual. And this kind of power of nature, since he came to this world, he has never felt it again, and even the power of life in this nature, he can no longer absorb it. But all of this, in the process of practicing while Naruto and Shizuka were doing it, all the mysteries were solved, and he seemed to see a whole new world, a whole new cultivation system. There is no force of nature, no force of life, and there are very few chakras in the body. This is the biggest desperate situation Naruto has encountered now. However, all of this was finally resolved at this moment, because the trace of chakra in Naruto's body that was slightly different from the original was not really extracted from the original solidified chakra, but by himself. An energy that is cultivated. Naruto finally understood the source of this chakra, a spiritual energy generated through the pleasure of intercourse with the girl, combined with the physical energy extracted from his own body, plus the one absorbed from the girl. A special energy, a brand new power with changes in yin and yang attributes. If the natural mode that Naruto could use before was to allow him to merge with nature, then this time, what he cultivated was the mode of how to merge with people, and to be more precise, how to use the negative energy in the girl's body way to practice. This negative energy is most abundant in virgins. Moreover, this must be used in the process of doing and loving. If it is practiced afterward, the effect will be greatly reduced. This is why every time Naruto has made great progress, it is only when the girl is broken for the first time, and no matter how the practice after that, the progress is limited. Feeling that there are more and more new chakras that have been continuously refined and combined in the body, they are getting stronger and stronger. While Naruto is delighted, he can't help but feel a little regretful. If he had discovered this mode that is equivalent to the double cultivation of yin and yang earlier, if so, everything will not change so passively. Chapter 492 Feeling empowered is cool. Cultivation continues. And the Shizuka on Naruto has already gone crazy. With Naruto's practice and movements, the chakra in Naruto also inadvertently flows to Shizuka's body along the intersection of the two. Although there is only a small one, this chakra is in Shizuka's body. When flowing in the meridians, it will not only produce a moisturizing effect, but also bring her an indescribably happy feeling. Under her body, she was already wet with the water flowing out, and it flowed along Naruto's body to the balcony, which was a real flood. But she didn't know it herself, the two kept doing it, and the sound produced when they were in love was like slapping the water surface. It is conceivable that Shizuka's place has really become a spring water. I don't know how long it took. Shizuka's throat was moaning, and her groaning was a little dry. She stuck out her fragrant tongue weakly, turned her back to the sky, and wrapped her jade arms tightly around Naruto's head. Her mind was completely blank. This happy dying feeling lasted for dozens of minutes. This feeling is more comfortable than falling into a high tide, making Shizuka want to die. Finally, when Naruto had completely refined that energy, the two finally stopped. Naruto slowly opened his eyes, and a bright light flashed in his eyes. At this moment, the chakra in his whole body was dozens of times stronger than before. I slightly estimated the amount of chakra at the moment, and it has completely reached the level of when I was in Genin. Even if it is the standard of ordinary Konoha ninjas, the amount of chakra alone has the level of ordinary Jonin. Moreover, the most important thing is that this chakra is not purely a combination of its own spiritual energy and its own body energy, but adds another energy to the two, which is the feminine energy of the Virgin. This negative energy has completely merged into Naruto's body and became part of his body energy. That is to say, this negative energy from the body of the opposite sex is not a one-time consumable, but can be generated spontaneously. And the new power formed by these three energies, even compared to the original natural mode combined with the power of nature, is not bad at all in terms of power level. This kind of power makes Naruto's chakra in the normal state, which is equivalent to entering the natural mode, and the power of the ninjutsu used is multiplied. And, better control. Surprised and overjoyed in his heart, he couldn't help but leap out, flying back and forth a few times on top of the surrounding buildings. However, when he looked down at Shizuka in his arms, he had already eaten slightly, and saw her face full of wet yuhi, her beautiful eyes closed unconsciously, and her small mouth was panting violently. Breathing, a pair of small hands also firmly grasped the clothes behind his back, his whole body was twitching slightly. Too bad, I ruined teacher Shizuka by patronizing cultivation. Naruto quickly withdrew from her body, stretched out his hand and stroked the bottom. His hands were full of hot water, a strange fascination, aura of love, and quietly explored, he found that the bottom of Shizuka was completely swollen. Not only in this way, when Naruto's fingers poked in, she kept pumping. Moved, as if to suck his fingers in completely. Naruto patted his head, feeling a little guilty in his heart. The next moment, he hurriedly treated Shizuka with his rough medical ninjutsu. A faint green light lit up from his hand, slowly covering the swollen spot between Shizuka's legs. After about 2 minutes, Yuhi's swelling had miraculously subsided, returning to its original pink tenderness. And Shizuka-sensei's body, which was panting and breathing rapidly, finally calmed down. She lay weakly on Naruto's chest and fell asleep again. Carefully helping her organize her clothes, Naruto picked her up and walked into the bedroom. Because he was afraid that the liquid on Shizuka's body would affect other people, and Naruto didn't want to bathe her to wake her up, he directly carried Shizuka into the bedroom where he slept before. After doing all this, Naruto could not help but let out a soft sigh. Looking at Saya and Rei, who were still sleeping in the master bedroom, Naruto couldn't help shaking his head, feeling a little fortunate that he and Shizuka were so intense on the balcony just now. Fortunately they didn't wake them up, otherwise. He shook his head and ran to take a shower. After a brief wash, he put on his clothes and came to the balcony again. At this time, the sun had already set, and night fell on the earth again. Looking down from the balcony, there were dead bodies walking back and forth on the streets near the rental house, and, most coincidentally, on the side of the door of my house. The gathering of dead bodies is the most, almost blocking the way out of the courtyard gate. He shook his head and smiled. Could it be that these guys were attracted by the movement when he was in love with Shizuka before? However, he no longer cares about these Naruto. At this moment, he feels the long-lost sense of power in his body, and he can't wait to vent it. The next moment, with a swoosh, his figure suddenly crossed a distance of 100 meters and appeared on the roof of another house. Under the night sky, his blonde hair fluttered in the wind, like a god descending in the dark night, standing tall and straight, looking forward, the light in his eyes seemed to be able to see through the entire dark night. Although Naruto's body only has the amount of chakra equivalent to Jonin at this time, but with his research on art and master, even with only these chakras, his strength is enough to compete with any powerhouse. Before there were so many chakras, Naruto was not afraid of any dangers in this world, and after having Jonin's chakras, he would not be hindered by any difficulties either. After going back and forth around the neighborhood a few times, Naruto found that there were no survivors, and some people were running away. Once Naruto came to these people, he would go directly to help solve the problem. Drop the dead bodies that were chasing them, and then leave in an instant. Only a golden light and shadow remained in the eyes of others. Is it God? Of the people who were rescued, almost no one knew how he left and how he appeared. His figure was almost silent, His speed was as fast as lightning, and his strength was as strong as a god. Naruto's unintentional actions made the survivors here think they have seen a god. When Naruto left, their will to survive became stronger, and their hearts were filled with new hope. Because they saw God. Chapter 493 Pretend to Sleep. But Naruto didn't know that when he was doing these things before leaving, Yazi, Saya, Lee and the others quietly opened their eyes. Fortunately, Gui Shin, who slept the most, was not awakened. They looked at each other, Yuhi dizzy all over their faces. When Naruto and Shizuka were doing things on the balcony before, Yuko was the first to come over, but she didn't go out, but wanted to lie on the bed and continue to rest for a while. The conversation between teacher Shizuka and Naruto, and the content of the conversation made Yako feel ashamed and angry. Things with mommy and the others in the room before, but now he has to do it with Shizuka-sensei. At this moment, Yazi didn't know what it was like. Was it a loss? Still disappointed? Anyway, her mood is very complicated. After that, the movement between the two became even louder. Through the curtains, she could even see the shadow of teacher Shizuka sitting on Naruto's body, which kept moving up and down. There was a turbulent time, and it could no longer be calm. Finally, their movements also awakened the sleeping Saya and Lee. After they were stunned for a while, they also reacted. Their voices. However, the sound is not controlled by them. No matter how much they resist, it will eventually enter their ears without a trace, and they find that the more they resist this kind of sound, the more strange they feel in their hearts. A warm feeling, hot sensations rose from their bodies. Then, the three women listened to the Spring Palace for more than an hour, causing the three of them to keep twisting their bodies, their mouths slightly tender, and they gasped. However, when Naruto and the two came in after finishing, the three girls immediately closed their eyes and pretended to sleep, which made Naruto mistakenly think that they had not been woken up. But I don't know, his bad behavior and H's behavior have long been known by the three girls. Naruto continued to jump back and forth for a long time outside. The feeling of borrowing chakra to jump tens of meters or even 100 meters high, let him regain the unrestrained ease in the Hokage world. In an instant, Naruto appeared on the balcony of his house in an instant. In the house, the lights were already on, the breeze flashed, and he turned around, and he had entered the master bedroom. Yazi, Saya, and Miyamoto Rei all woke up. At this time, the three of them were sitting on the sofa, and there was some freshly boiled porridge on the small table in front of them. Everyone was drinking with a bowl in their hands. The appearance of Naruto made the three girls stop, and their faces were all Yuhi. You all got up, how are you sleeping? Naruto greeted with a smile. The three girls couldn't help but curse in their hearts. It's no wonder they slept well. How could you possibly put us to sleep by doing that kind of thing on the balcony? Asshole. However, of course they wouldn't say it, but there was already a strange look in Naruto's eyes. It's okay. In order to ease the embarrassment, Yako said with a smile. Although she was still very concerned about the things Naruto had done before, she felt a little uncomfortable, but she still tried her best to control herself not to be influenced by her emotions and confuse the mind. Naruto didn't notice the difference between the three girls. He smiled and sat down, and then Yako greeted him for some porridge. Sensei, who should have slept with them and then did sex with Naruto on the balcony, the three girls did not mention it, nor did they wake up Mommy and Yanyi. How could they be embarrassed to look for embarrassment at such a time? After drinking for a while, Naruto glanced at the three girls and suddenly asked, "Where's Gui Shin?" He found that Gui Shin, who was supposed to be sleeping with them, was gone. She just woke up and went to her sister's room. She said with a face Yuhi. Naruto was slightly startled, and the secret was not good. At this time, Yanyi and the others should be in a mess. If this girl, Gui Shin, ran in, she would definitely know. Although this girl is only at the age of junior high school, it is precisely because of this that she is more sensitive to this kind of thing. Just when he felt bad in his heart, Gui Shin finally came out of her sister's room. Her face was Yuhi moist, as if she was drunk. Seeing Yazi and the others sitting on the sofa drinking porridge with Naruto, he couldn't help but walk over and glared at Naruto secretly, then raised his little foot and stomped on him fiercely, and whispered to him, "Brother Naruto, you are so bad. You actually made sisters and the others like that." Yuhi dizziness flashed across her pretty face, and she sat on the opposite sofa with her sweet butt up. Well. Naruto covered his forehead and sighed in his heart. It seems that this girl, Gui Shin, found out. His old face made Yuhi, and after regaining his senses, he hurriedly called Haha to find an excuse to escape. "I'm full, go back to the room to prepare something, and call me if you have anything." Seeing how he was fleeing, Gui Shin snorted at his back from a distance, causing the three of them to giggle. "Gui Shin, you are so brave. Even Naruto dares to tease." Lee couldn't help saying. Gui Shin smiled and said, "He's my brother-in-law. My brother-in-law has to let my sister-in-law do it. Anyway, he didn't do that kind of thing once or twice. I watched it last time." He don't say it. She almost said that she leaked the thing that she peeked at her sister and Naruto that day, and said what she loved, which is very shameful. She wouldn't say it. However, Saya and Lee, who were aroused by Gui Shin's curiosity, didn't let her go at all, grabbing her small arms and asking questions. "Heart, tell me what you saw. Did Naruto do H?" Saya asked with a face of 8 trigrams, as expected of a talented girl, she could think of it all. Gui Shin was flustered for a while, and quickly broke away from the two girls. "I won't tell you guys. I'll go find Big Brother Naruto." The three women looked at each other, feeling a little strange. At this time, just as Naruto closed the door, he saw Gui Shin burst in and slammed into him. "Heart, what are you doing rashly?" Naruto said while holding her head. "Well, it's nothing, I just came to see if Brother Naruto needs help anywhere." She shook her head, broke away Naruto and pressed her big hand. Chapter 494 Hillary Alice. Naruto glanced at Shizuka, who was sleeping soundly in the bed, and when he saw Gui Shin's ghostly appearance, he said, "Then go and bring me some paper and a writing brush." Paper and writing brush. "Brother Naruto, what do you want these for?" Gui Shin was taken aback for a moment, and asked very puzzled. "Don't ask too much, just go get it first." Naruto patted her thin little shoulder. "Well, okay." Gui Shin pursed her lips slightly and walked out of the room in response. On the other hand, Naruto sat down on the chair beside him, and when Gui Shin finally brought all the pen and paper, he motioned her to put the things on the table. "Brother Naruto, what are you doing?" According to Naruto, after finally getting the pen and paper, Gui Shin blinked a pair of big clear eyes and looked at him with a puzzled expression. Naruto smiled lightly. "Give me the ink." "Oh," Gui Shin replied obediently. She was so curious that she couldn't help thinking to herself, Naruto brother is still interested in writing calligraphy. It's so weird. When she was grinding the ink, Naruto had already cut the paper into the size of a palm, and stacked a dozen sheets together. Then, he took the pen and dipped it in the sharpened ink, and began to draw on the paper. At the same time, a faint chakra followed the brush in his hand and drew on the paper. Make a detonator. Although this is not the world of Hokage, there is no paper and ink specially used to make detonation symbols, but at Naruto's current level, he mixed his own chakra, and used ordinary ink and pen to draw this stroke on ordinary paper. The detonating talisman can also achieve a good effect. The detonating talisman made a few days ago has been used up, and now I have to continue to make a few more while I have time. Ah, Naruto brother, are you painting? But I can't understand what you're painting. So your painting skills are so poor. Gui Shin saw him beside him. I couldn't understand anything in the painting, so I couldn't help but smile. Naruto laughed and scolded, "You better be quiet, you'll find out later." Gui Shin stuck out his tongue and stopped talking. Because the chakra in Naruto has made great progress now, it is very easy to draw the detonating symbol continuously. With his non-professional level, he can draw a good one in 10 minutes. In less than an hour, he had already drawn 10 detonating symbols. After stretching, Naruto looked at his results with satisfaction. Guishin ran out of boredom long ago, while Shizuka was still asleep. Putting down the pen, Naruto came to the master bedroom, intending to relax. It was already 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening, and when Naruto walked out of the room, he happened to see Yazi, Saya, Rei, and Guishin sitting on the sofa watching TV. As soon as he saw Naruto, Guishin exclaimed, "Brother Naruto, come and see, now the whole world has become like that." Naruto frowned, came to the TV, and saw the horrible pictures inside. These pictures were all taken from the air with helicopters, and this was the only radio station that could still be received, TV Tokyo. Broadcast content. It seems that the United States took the lead in such a crisis, followed by Japan, followed by the Celestial Dynasty. This plague-like zombie tide seems to be spreading from east to west. So, it is very likely that you have already encountered such a danger in the moment you are in Paris. Naruto frowned, and carefully sensed the Horaitian coordinates that he had set on the instant body, and could not help but slightly relieved. Fortunately, although she could not sense the environmental conditions over there, her body was still very good. Did not encounter any danger. Hasn't this disaster spread to her now? Or, has she been protected from danger? Thinking of this, Naruto couldn't help but want to teleport to see the situation with a Horaitian technique. However, just when he was about to do this, a scream suddenly came from downstairs outside the balcony. All the girls were slightly startled, and they all looked at each other. It was the screaming voice of a living person. The next moment, Naruto rushed to the balcony first, looking at the direction where the sound came from, and Yazi and the others followed closely behind. In front of a house not far away, the lights were still on, the door was open, and a wooden stick tied with a sharp weapon suddenly stretched out from inside, and stuck it straight at a middle-aged man standing at the door. On the man. Kai. The wooden stick was taken back, and several people in the room shouted in fear. I'm sorry, we don't want to, but we have to do it." Boom. The door is closed. The middle-aged man fell in a pool of blood, a large hole was poked in his abdomen, and blood couldn't stop gushing out. And beside him, a little girl with short pink hair who was only 11 or 12 years old, was standing there dumbfounded, watching her father fall weakly to the ground, as if she was frightened. Since her mother also died, the father who took her all the way to escape here was the only support in her heart when she was young, but now her support, her father, did not die in the hands of those terrifying zombies, but killed alive by those who were still alive. At this moment, her heart was full of grief and despair. "Dad!" She was stunned for a long time, and finally screamed and fell on her father's body and cried. Tears fell on her father's body. The middle-aged man still retained a trace of breath, and said slowly, "Yes, I'm sorry, Alice, Dad. I'm going to my mother's place, leaving you alone. I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. You must live strong." When the middle-aged man said the last sentence, his eyes were full of despair. He knew that without his Alice, how could Alice, who is alone, survive in this world full of despair? However, he always held such a small hope in his heart. This scene made Naruto and others on the balcony look angry, especially Naruto, because the person who killed the middle-aged man was one of the people he had rescued before. Unexpectedly, these people have been driven crazy by this collapsing world. Instead of helping others, they killed others. This action made Naruto even more angry. Chapter 495 Safe. At this time, due to Alice's cry, there were constantly dead bodies attracted by the movement here, and they slowly walked towards the yard and appeared in front of Alice. When the middle-aged man was dying, he also saw the appearance of the dead bodies coming. He used all his strength to say to his daughter, "Alice, run quickly, get out of here, you must live." "No, Dad, I want to be with Dad." Alice cried even more fiercely. In the cry, the dead bodies seemed to have seen delicious food, and went crazy towards Alice's body. The direction flew over. Suddenly, a white puppy rushed out from the side, stopped in front of Alice and barked at the group of dead bodies, as if he never wanted to. Alice was stunned. She didn't expect her little pet dog to be so loyal and kind to herself. However, the puppy's roar was useless at all, and the dead were still approaching. At this moment, a dagger suddenly pierced the night sky and flew to the ground in front of Alice, slanting into the soil. Alice was still crying on her father's body, ignoring the figures of the corpses flying over. Swish! The next moment, a figure flashed out of thin air in front of Alice, like a golden glow in the night sky. Instant, Naruto used Hiraishin's technique to stop Alice in front of him. He slowly crouched down and pulled out the dagger on the ground. The girls on the balcony suddenly disappeared when they saw him, and then suddenly appeared in the distance. This was exactly the same as the previous example of him disappearing in the car. Their faces could not help but be full of surprise and exploration. Alice seemed to feel something and raised her head slightly. When she saw a tall and straight figure standing there in front of her, she couldn't help but stop crying. Naruto took back kunai and put it in the bag at his waist, but instead of rushing to kill the dead bodies, he turned around and came to Alice's father's side, crouched down, and put his hands on his stomach. A faint green light suddenly lit up from his palm, full of a breath of life. Alice widened her eyes and looked at the green light in disbelief. Big brother. She stared blankly at the scene in front of her that she had only seen on TV, and fell into a sluggishness. Naruto frowned, with a focused look, lowered his head and continued to treat him with medical ninjutsu. However, what made him helpless was that the middle-aged man's body was injured to the point where he could not be rescued at all with his meager medical ninjutsu skills. It would be great if he could absorb the power of life at this time. Unfortunately, he can't use it. No, it's useless. The middle-aged man was lying on the ground and seemed to be shocked by Naruto's appearance and the magical skills he showed, but after being shocked, he suddenly reached out and grabbed Naruto's body. With both hands, he said slowly, please don't waste your energy, young man. Can I ask you one thing?" The green light in Naruto's hand gradually dissipated, and he nodded slightly. "Please speak." For me, take care of Alice." Okay, please, answer, promise me," the middle-aged man said pleadingly. He looked at his daughter Alice lovingly, his face full of disbelief. You who are so amazing, must be able to protect Alice." Naruto nodded and agreed without hesitation. "Okay, I promise you." "Well, then don't worry." The middle-aged man finally breathed a sigh of relief when he heard the words, and the divine light in his eyes gradually dissipated. Dad. Seeing her father die in front of her with her own eyes, Alice couldn't help crying again, a heart-piercing cry that spread almost to the entire night sky. Naruto shook his head helplessly. If he had medical ninjutsu like Sakura or Tsunade, the middle-aged man would not die. However, although he is the 6th generation Hokage, he has seen a lot of ninjutsu, but he can the Grandmaster are only some combat ninjutsu, and the medical ninjutsu is only a beginner. It is not a problem to treat some minor injuries, but he can't do anything about this level of injury. He stretched out his hand to support Alice's shoulder and said softly, "Is your name Alice? Don't cry yet, even if your father dies, you have to be strong, you know." Alice Zhao, her small body trembled slightly. She raised her face that was crying like pear blossoms in rain. Her slightly swollen eyes were full of tears. Her innocent and beautiful little face was full of sadness and despair. Seeing her like this, Naruto couldn't help feeling pity. Such a little girl should have a happy childhood and a bright future, but this apocalyptic world shattered all her dreams. Naruto stood up, turned around, faced the group of dead bodies that were coming straight in, stretched out his hands on his chest, and slowly formed a few handprints. Futon, wind style, the art of wind cutting. A soft drink rang out from Naruto's mouth, and the next moment, an invisible wind blade the size of a person appeared in front of him out of thin air, flying horizontally towards the dead bodies in front of him. The technique of wind cutting, as the name suggests, turns the power of the wind into a sharp blade, killing all enemies in front of you. After Naruto uses this ninjutsu, he can also control the movement and direction of this wind blade with his powerful control. The invisible wind blade seemed to pass through all the dead bodies slowly and quickly, and instantly disappeared into the distant night sky. The next moment, all the dead bodies that were rushing towards Naruto stopped, and then, from their necks, blood arrows shot out. Chi-chi. Almost at the same time, the necks of all the dead bodies in front of Naruto were cut by the wind, and then, the heads of the dead bodies kept falling to the ground in the courtyard. Naruto lowered his hands and exhaled slightly. The speed of using ninjutsu to solve dead bodies is fast. When a wind blade goes down, these unresponsive dead bodies have almost no time to react, which is countless times faster than the melee fight with a dagger before. He turned around, looked at Alice who was staring blankly at him and said, "It's over, Alice, now you are safe." Big brother. Alice stopped crying, because she was completely shocked by this magical scene. At this moment, she thought that the hallucination appeared in front of her eyes, that she was already dead, dream. However, when she looked up at Naruto's gentle smiling face, she knew that all this was extremely real. These are not dreams. On the balcony over there, they were all dumbfounded when they saw the heads of the dozen or so dead bodies falling to the ground. Is even eerie compared to the scene. Chapter 496 Ability. Magic. Just by doing a few strange actions, the dead bodies fell to the ground. What is this? Magic. Qigong. Sword Chi. The heads of the girls have fallen into a slight short circuit. It's magic. It's magic. Saya suddenly shouted, and she pointed at Naruto with a shocked face, only to see Naruto move his hands slightly, and the ground in the yard suddenly separated to both sides out of thin air, revealing a small rectangular pit about 2 meters long and 1 meter wide. Then Naruto turned around and picked up the corpse of Alice's father, the middle-aged man, put it in the pit, and said to Alice, "The dead are buried in the ground, I will bury your father here, Alice, you should agree, right?" Alice's slightly swollen eyes, her reluctant gaze fell on her father's body. After listening to Naruto's words, she finally nodded slightly. Naruto stretched out his hand and quietly squeezed a seal, and the pit was covered up again, returning to its original appearance, as if it had never been dug up. In addition to the sadness in Alice's eyes, seeing this magical scene, she couldn't help showing surprise. Then, she suddenly knelt down and kowtowed a few times towards the place where her father was buried, then stood up and walked to Naruto's side. Her trembling little hand pulled up his big hand, raised her head and said gratefully, "Big brother." "Alice, thank you." Naruto smiled slightly, put his hand on her head gently, rubbed her soft pink short hair, looked at her and said, "Alice, I will protect you from now on and I won't hurt you again." Hearing Naruto's gentle words, tears flowed from Alice's eyes again, and she finally couldn't help throwing herself into Naruto's arms and let her cry. Naruto hugged her by the waist, reached out and patted the girl's weak back gently, comforting her gently. At this time, the white puppy next to him suddenly stuck out his tongue and bit Naruto's trousers lightly. Naruto was stunned for a moment, and couldn't help but smile. "Little thing, do you want to follow us too?" The little dog seemed to be able to understand what Naruto said, his little head nodded and barked a few times. Alice in her arms stopped crying when she heard the dog barking, left Naruto's arms, reached out to pick up the puppy, and whispered, "This puppy is so cute, let's not leave it, okay?" The puppy seemed to understand her words, and licked Alice's face happily, and the tears on Alice's face finally stopped flowing. "Okay." Naruto smiled and nodded. "That's great. Puppy, you'll follow us from now on. I'll call you Jiku, okay?" "Wong, Wong." The puppy seemed to be responding, barking with a cheerful look. "Jiku, Kiku." Alice laughed with tears on her face. "Wow, wow." Jiku responded, licking Alice's little face again. Seeing this scene, Naruto couldn't help but laugh. The next moment, he hugged Alice's delicate body again, and his body jumped up, with a few flashes, and appeared on the balcony in an instant. After bringing Alice and Jiku back, Naruto smiled slightly at his sons Sayori and Gui Shin who were staring blankly at him. "If you have anything to say, let's go in and talk. The goddesses were stunned for a moment, then they reacted and followed Naruto into the master bedroom. Alice stopped crying. She leaned against Naruto's warm arms, raised her head and looked around the room curiously. Big brother, where is this place? This is where we live temporarily, those dead bodies will never come in. Naruto said softly. I don't know your name, big brother. Alice asked again. Naruto, just call me Naruto brother. Oh. Alice responded, and lay in his arms and stopped talking. The death of her father made her very sad for a while, and the only thing she felt reliable at the moment was the big brother Naruto beside her. Relying on his warm arms, Alice slowly fell asleep. She was stimulated too much, and fled here with her father all the way. What happened was a little girl who was only 11 or 12 years old. Unbearable. And now, after the disaster, only Naruto's embrace can make her find warmth and security again. After Alice fell asleep, Naruto wanted to put her aside and let her sleep, but found that her small hands were holding her clothes tightly and did not want to let go. Helpless, Naruto had to let her stay in his arms. Seeing how Naruto loved Alice so much, all the girls had gentle smiles on their faces. The puppy Jiku beside him also licked the back of Naruto's hand. After a while, everyone came back to their senses from this warm atmosphere with a hint of sadness. The eyes of the girls fell on Naruto tightly, looking at him as if they were going to cut him open carefully. Research the same. You, just say something if you have anything to say, don't keep looking at me like this. Naruto spread his hands and said. The four girls looked at each other. Saya stood up first, walked to Naruto, leaned over slightly, and those beautiful eyes suddenly stared at him at close range. Naruto, did you use magic just now? Naruto was stunned for a moment, his eyes swept over her heavily dangling chest, and replied, you can understand it is magic. Then are you a human or a ghost? Saya asked again. If I were a ghost, I would have eaten you long ago. Hearing this question, Naruto glared at her angrily. Well, Sayanin's face slightly Yuhi, hesitantly asked again, then are you an ordinary person? Otherwise, how could it be possible to do magic? This is not scientific. Faced with this question, Naruto was really unable to answer, and if he wanted to explain it, it would involve things in the world of Hokage. It was really difficult for him to explain it for a while, so he had to ask, have you heard of a power user? Ability user. The other three women were also stunned. Lee said, isn't this someone from science fiction? Could it be that big brother Naruto is a power user? Gui Shin exclaimed excitedly. Naruto nodded seriously, yes. I am an ability user. But my ability is a newly awakened ability, so you didn't know it before. Really? Yako frowned slightly. To be honest, her strength for Naruto has been from admiration at the beginning to shock later, and now unbelievable, she has been completely unable to see through Naruto. Now, hearing his words, she already felt as magical as listening to a science fiction story or a movie. However, she still had some doubts in her heart. For example, Naruto gave herself an indescribable powerhouse aura in school. If what he said was a newly awakened power user, it should be don't make yourself feel that way. And Saya Heli and Gui Shin were already attracted by what Naruto said. When they heard him say that he was a supernatural being, the three girls were all excitedly surrounding him and kept asking him questions. Example, Naruto, what kind of abilities do you have? Naruto, did you just disappear by teleportation? Naruto, is your ability to use magic? A series of questions were asked, and the three girls could not wait to cut open his head to see what was hidden inside. Naruto had no choice but to make up some excuses to perfunctory. However, the enthusiasm of the three girls seemed to never stop, and Naruto's answer still could not satisfy their curiosity. In the end, Saya and Rei even held Naruto tightly in their arms with one arm. Naruto, can you teach me magic? Naruto, I want to learn teleportation. Chapter 497 Strange Atmosphere. Naruto felt that the incomparably tall and full chest of the two women surrounded his arms, and he could even feel the two slight bumps on the chests of the two women. People have been made a little uncontrollable. Fortunately, at this time, the most calm child came up and pulled the two away, and said lightly, I think whether it is supernatural power or magic, these are not things that ordinary people can learn, so don't think about it anymore. There are with this idea, it's better to spend time thinking about how to arm yourself with the existing conditions. After all, if we rely on Naruto's strength alone, our existence is worthless. Yazi waved his hand lightly, picked up the long oak knife on the side, and said, then we must truly fight and survive together, and each of us must exert our strength as much as possible. Quote. Saya and Lee then left Naruto's side, lowered their heads slightly, and fell into deep thought. Lee is not bad, she has good spear skills and will never back down when dealing with dead bodies, but Saya is different. Although she is a gifted girl in school and has a prominent family, she has many auras in one. But in this apocalyptic world that relies purely on force, what role should she play? Not only her, but also Gui Shin is also thinking about this issue, but, compared to Shay, Gui Shin puts herself more in the position of being Naruto's sister-in-law, and her brother-in-law protects her sister-in-law, as it should be. Okay, don't think about it anymore, let's go find your parents first. Although this world has become like this, we must not give up hope, right? And with me here, I will never let you have any trouble. Yes, don't worry. Naruto showed a bright smile on his face, and the four girls couldn't help but feel a sigh of relief, and their hearts were beating in unison. After speaking, Naruto broke the little hand of the girl in his arms, gently placed her on the bed, covered the quilt, returned to the room, and continued to make those detonating charms. It was now past 10 o'clock, and Naruto had just finished making a detonating talisman when Shizuka, who was sleeping soundly on the bed, suddenly opened her eyes with a bang. She looked around with a pair of beautiful eyes, and when she saw Naruto sitting on the stool with her back to her under the light, she couldn't help feeling a little warm in her heart. Naruto. She got up gently, the quilt covering her body slowly slid down from her tender body, revealing the hot body inside. Naruto looked back at her. Teacher Shizuka, you are awake, why don't you sleep for a while? How long have I slept? Shizuka covered her forehead slightly and frowned slightly. She remembered that she seemed to be dying, and the culprit was the guy in front of her. Thinking of his incomparably brave movements, the strength with which she almost stabbed herself in and out of her body, a burst of red yuhi suddenly rose on her face, and she thought to herself, no wonder he was in the room with Mommy Yan before. They are doing that. With such a powerful function, a woman simply cannot satisfy it. Naruto was also a little ashamed. Before, he was immersed in chakra training and did not take into account her feelings. As a result, she almost broke her. Hearing this, he touched his nose and smiled, it's almost 5 hours. Quote. Really, I didn't expect to sleep for so long. Shizuka moved, got out of bed and stood up. Suddenly, she stretched out her hand between her legs in surprise and said softly, why doesn't it hurt? Could it be? Is it a dream? No way. It's already been. With a puzzled face, she glanced at Naruto, only to see that the other person's gaze was falling between her legs. Only then did she notice how inappropriate her actions were. Sitting back on the bed, Yuhi's face was full of dizziness, and he looked at Naruto and said angrily, Naruto, what the hell is going on? Didn't we already? Naruto knew what she was talking about. Generally speaking, a girl who just broke her body did it so intensely for the first time. Without a day and a night of rest, it would be impossible to get up and go to the ground, but Shizuka just slept for a while and it was completely fine. There is no pain or swelling under the body, it is completely like nothing. He chuckled and said, Teacher Shizuka, I have a way to help you heal the injury there. So don't be suspicious, isn't it good? Naruto, you still need to heal that kind of injury. Shizuka's face turned a little yuhi, she couldn't help but have some unsightly images in her mind, and she was also very curious about how Naruto healed by himself. Naruto sweated. At this moment, a grunt sounded suddenly, and the sound came from Shizuka's stomach. She couldn't help but look at Yuhi, looking at Naruto a little embarrassed. Naruto thought it was funny. I haven't eaten in a long time, there is something to eat outside, let's eat some. After Shizuka heard the words, she got up and ran out of the room. Seeing her buttocks twisting violently as she walked, Naruto secretly swallowed saliva. At the same time, in another room, Mami, Yanyi, Otome, and the 4 other people in the world were also woken up by hunger. After the traces of love, Yuhi dizziness rose on everyone's face, and they turned their faces away and did not dare to look at each other's bodies. Because everything that happened before was really too kinky and messy. They couldn't imagine that the 4 girls were in the same room, courting Naruto in various ways, remembering how they had their sweet ass up and constantly asking Naruto to insert themselves. Their faces were bleeding from Yuhi. Come. They looked at each other and saw shame in each other's eyes. After a while, the 4 daughters finally found their own items from the messy clothes on the bed and the ground to put them on, took a quick shower, and walked out of the room after washing. At this time, Yazi and the others who had seen Shizuka come out had already gone to prepare some food. Seeing Yanyi and the others walking out of the room together, they made more. However, because the 4 women of Yanyi and Naruto did those things in the room before, they all looked a little shy at this time, for fear that they would see the difference between them, so they didn't say much, and after saying hello just ate something. On the side of Yazi, they, who already knew it, did not expose it, and continued to watch the live news on TV. Chapter 498 Find Weapons. Suddenly, Shay frowned and said suddenly, "Oops, the country has fired a nuclear bomb." What's wrong? What nuclear bomb? The girls all gathered around and said inexplicably. Shay frowned and said, "I didn't expect that all countries have launched nuclear bombs. As a result, the electronic equipment we use now will be disturbed. It is very likely that we will not be able to use anything that relies on electricity in the future." What? When the girls heard this, they couldn't help but exclaimed. It is conceivable that once the world runs out of electricity and electricity cannot be used, it will be very inconvenient for people. Moreover, in a situation where the world is full of dead bodies, if we cannot rely on high-tech power-related equipment, human beings will not be able to use it. The chances of survival will be greatly reduced. Just as Saya continued to explain, the TV screen in the room suddenly flickered, and after a while, all the pictures turned into snowflakes. It seems that the radio signal has been affected. Now it's only 2 or 3 days after the disaster broke out. Unexpectedly, the world has collapsed like this. If it goes on like this, if there is no one to take care of it, it will soon become impossible to use electricity. In that case, this place will become completely dark in the dark night. The girls sat together with worry on their faces. However, this is only the beginning of the collapse of the world. They all know in their hearts, how many people can survive to the end among so many dead bodies in the world. How can human beings find a piece of pure land to live together and end this state of escape? The army is in action, but what about ordinary people? So what? All of this will be a problem that everyone will face in the future. The next day, it still rose from the east brightly. If you don't look at the devastated earth at the moment, the morning glow still looks very beautiful. Naruto made a total of 30 detonating talismans last night and didn't fall asleep, but after all the girls fell asleep, he quietly came out of the house, and then dodged to the house that rejected Alice's father. In the family, the person who killed Alice's father was personally dealt with and avenged for Alice. Then came back to sleep. Now that he wakes up, he feels refreshed, and the chakra in his body is constantly flowing, bringing him a new vitality. The girls also got up, and after taking turns to wash, they were all sorting their things. Because, today, I have to leave here and go to this world full of crisis outside. There is not much food left at home, only the rations for 1 meal are left, and it is impossible for everyone to stay here forever. Moreover, they must also have their own wishes to achieve, to find their own relatives. Naruto stood on the balcony, overlooking the entire surrounding community. A few people in the family last night, except for the guy who was killed by him, were so scared that they fled here overnight, knowing whether the escape was successful or if he became a dead body on the way. Anyway, he didn't care anymore. At this moment, Wei Shin's exclamation suddenly came from the room. "What's wrong?" Naruto turned around and entered the house, and saw that all the girls were packing their things, while Wei Shin was squatting in front of the drawer of a large cabinet, holding a few metal objects in her hands. "Brother Naruto, don't you think this is a bullet?" She ran over and took the bullet in her hand to Naruto. Naruto took it and saw that it was indeed a bullet, although he didn't know what kind of bullet it was. However, this metallic texture is definitely real. How come there are bullets here? Naruto couldn't help but be a little puzzled, walked over and looked at the drawer, and found that there was actually a magazine in it. He couldn't help but be stunned, and asked Shizuka, who was trying on a skirt, "Mr. Shizuka, what did your friend do before? Why are there bullets in the room where he lives?" My friend seems to be a police officer like Miss Mommy, but I heard that she is very good, and she is a sniper. It seems that she is ranked in the top 5 in the country among the police." Shizuka turned back said. Mommy couldn't help but exclaimed, "Wow. I didn't expect your friend to be so powerful. I'm so envious." She only came back once a long time. Although I have been helping her at home, I haven't touched anything in the cabinet, and I don't know. Shizuka came over and looked at Naruto. The magazine in the drawer had a puzzled look on his face. "What's wrong, Naruto?" "It's nothing. Since your friend is a policeman, it's no wonder." Naruto put the magazine back and said. Suddenly he saw a safe next to the cabinet, and a strange feeling suddenly rose in his heart. The next moment, he walked directly over, his fingers lightly wrapped around the lock of the safe, and a small sharp wind blade flashed past. With a bang, the iron rope was cut, and Naruto opened the whole box with a bang. Naruto, what are you doing? This is my friend's thing." Shizuka let out a slight whistle, but when she was about to say something, she was already shocked by what she saw. This is... Shizuka looked at the box of firearms and weapons in disbelief, as well as various ammunition. The other girls were also attracted and surrounded the insurance alley, suddenly exclaiming, "There are so many weapons." The girls glanced at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. So, wouldn't everyone's most worrying problem be solved? With so many weapons, what are you afraid of? However, after everyone was excited, they suddenly stood there at a loss, because they discovered a very serious problem, that is, no one here seems to use these things. Damn it, Shay yelled while covering his forehead. You can't even use any of these weapons just by looking at them. Aren't you a genius? You should do some research, right? Otome teased. Shay glared at her. I'm a genius in learning. Not a genius in military weapons. Otome stuck out her tongue. Okay, let me try it. Naruto stood up, moved the box to the balcony, picked up one of the slightly heavy automatic rifles, and observed it carefully. Chapter 499 Genius Weapon. Naruto doesn't have much research on firearms, but he was also very interested in this kind of things before crossing, but he never had a chance to contact them, and then he entered the world of Hokage, where the ninjutsu is more than firearms. It's wonderful, so although Naruto was a little surprised to see these things at this time, he didn't have much interest. It's just that I'm happy that the girls around me can use it because I have a weapon. However, the biggest problem is that the girls have never touched these firearms at all, and no one knows how to use them, which is troublesome. Therefore, after thinking for a while, Naruto decided to do it himself and researched it. With his talent, he could become an invincible existence in the Hokage world, and these firearms in his hand would never stump him. After fiddling with it for a while, Naruto quickly found a way to load the bullet. He reached out to hold the automatic rifle in his hand, and squeezed the trigger with his fingers. Towards the balcony, the swaying dead body gently pulled. Boom! A crisp gunshot sounded, and all the girls around were startled. The gun body shook slightly, and the recoil came. Naruto's hand held steady, and the bullet flew out, instantly piercing the chest of a dead body. The first shot was not accurate, because Naruto originally aimed at the opponent's head, but due to the first shot, he missed. But despite this, the girls still felt very excited. I didn't expect Naruto to be so powerful, and hit a dead body as soon as he shot. Naruto shook his head. After the first shot test, he had basically mastered the characteristics of this automatic rifle, the gun's power, rate of fire, drift rate, recoil and other factors. So, he fired a second shot. Boom! This time, the bullet flew directly over a distance of more than 100 meters, and pierced the forehead of the dead body with a puff. Hit it right. Naruto put down the gun. The girls cheered. It's amazing. Big brother Naruto, I didn't expect your marksmanship to be so powerful. Guei-shin exclaimed tenderly. Naruto, is this really your first time using a gun? How is this possible? Saya looked unacceptable. She was recognized as a genius in school, but in front of Naruto's learning ability, it was simply its scum. This filled her heart with a sense of frustration. She has always been a self-proclaimed genius, but this time she has truly seen a genius, and it feels really uncomfortable. Shay stood aside with a depressed expression, unable to speak. After Naruto fired, he picked up the other weapons in the box and tried them one by one. He tried them all, including semi-automatic pistols, crossbows, shotguns, semi-automatic rifles, revolvers, and more than a dozen firearms, big and small. And also learned to use it very easily. Every time he takes the second shot, he has reached 100% accuracy, and he also knows the performance of each weapon. With a faint smile, Naruto put these weapons back in the box, looked at the girls and said, I have tried all these weapons, I think you can wear some on your body, and I will teach you how. Yeah, all the girls nodded, their eyes flashing with admiration and excitement. Although Yan Yi, Guei-shin, and Alice were a little afraid of these firearms, Yazi was also very interested in these kinds of firearms because of his kendo practice. Weapons aren't of any interest, but after seeing everyone else picking them up, they finally had to choose one. Of course, Alice is too young to hold a gun, so she can only hold the puppy in her arms. Although Guei-shin is already in junior high school, she doesn't have much strength. After hurting himself, he reluctantly gave up. On the contrary, after overcoming the initial fear, Yan Yi has changed his mind. In the end, Yazi also chose a semi-automatic rifle to wear on her body, but she also took a military thorn, inserted it into the leggings at the calf, and put on the purple lace garter, revealing her snow-white jade tender skin. The long knife on his waist also looks like he is fully armed, which is extraordinarily heroic. Shizuka also took a modified semi-automatic pistol, and the crossbow was given to Otome. The pistol, Yan Yi's, is an ordinary May 4th pistol. In this way, almost every girl has a weapon, and Guei-shin and Alice are responsible for carrying some ammunition ready to provide everyone at any time. Of course, although these weapons have been distributed, the girls still don't know how to use them, at least they need a familiar process, and Naruto didn't let them shoot at will. It's just that he decided to take a moment to familiarize them with them. Everyone taught them hands-on for a while, and the target was the dead bodies under the balcony. For a while, bang 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 gunshots continued to sound, the dead bodies downstairs were killed, and occasionally there would be cheers from a certain girl because a shot was hit. However, just as the girls were experimenting with their weapons, something bad happened. The dead bodies under the balcony were constantly being shot, and the sound of gunfire here was attracting a large number of dead bodies to this side. At first, the girls were not aware of the joy of shooting, until more and more dead bodies came. Everyone finally realized when they were surrounded by the courtyard wall. All the roads are blocked, how do you get out? The gunfire stopped, and the girls looked at each other. Shay exclaimed angrily, really, we are so excited. We made such a major mistake. After a slight estimate, the number of dead bodies surrounding the rental house was at least a few hundred, or even thousands. With so many dead bodies, almost all the surrounding roads leading to the outside world were blocked, and off-road vehicles were almost unable to drive out. The girls were anxious, and they all looked at Naruto beside him, expecting what he could do. After all, his magic was obvious to all. In their eyes, Naruto is a man who knows magic, a man like God. Okay, don't worry, these dead bodies may be a little troublesome if they are placed before, but for now, we can just follow the original plan. Pack up and get on the bus. Naruto smiled lightly and waved his hand. Seeing his extremely confident look, the girls all nodded, put away their weapons, brought some clothes that must be changed and some rations, and came to the courtyard downstairs. Chapter 500 Killing and Redemption. When I got into the car, because there was one more person, the car became even more crowded, but fortunately Alice was petite and small, so it didn't matter if she sat on other people's laps, so it wasn't a big problem for the time being. However, Naruto and Yazi sat on the roof as before. In order to make people sit more stable, Naruto slightly modified the roof of the off-road vehicle and added a guardrail on the side. At first, the two stood on the roof of the car, relying on the guardrail, and then set up a machine gun, and even if there were dead bodies rushing towards the car along the way, they could directly blast them out. A large number of dead bodies gathered in front of the gate of the compound. After they sensed Naruto and the others, they rioted and stretched out their hands desperately to push the iron gate of the compound. Although the iron gate is very strong, under the joint efforts of many dead bodies with power beyond ordinary people, soon, the gate of the compound collapsed with a bang, and in an instant, countless dead bodies screamed and rushed towards the off-road vehicle. The girls in the car, including the girl on the roof, couldn't help but get nervous. After they learned about Naruto's power, they had unconditional trust in him, so he did not change what he had done before. Everyone did not violate the chaotic decision. Although they were extremely nervous and even afraid at this time, they still believed in Naruto very much in their hearts. Naruto, Yako called him softly. In this case, she saw Naruto still looked very relaxed and mysterious, and couldn't help but feel a little resentful. Is this guy deliberately challenging everyone's nerves? Naruto smiled slightly and glanced at Yazi. At the moment when all the dead bodies rushed in and rushed into the courtyard gate, he suddenly stretched out his hand to make a seal, and said softly, "Break." Suddenly, there was a loud explosion on the ground at the gate of the courtyard. Boom boom boom. Intense fire, accompanied by violent shock waves, suddenly occurred at the gate of the courtyard. This sudden explosion was as if several heavy bombs were dropped on the spot out of thin air, shocking all the girls. The courtyard gate in front of me was blown down in an instant, and in the firelight, countless dead bodies were smashed into pieces of meat, flames, smoke, gravel, flying all over the sky. This is the power of the detonating talisman that Naruto set before. The 10 detonating talismans detonated at this moment, and the killing effect brought by them is absolutely unimaginable. Especially at the moment when the dead bodies were most concentrated, these detonating charms blew up hundreds of dead bodies. In the flames, the road in front of the courtyard gate has been blasted to impassable. Naruto reached out and squeezed the seal again, and the Doden Earth-style technique was released. The road ahead became smooth again in an instant. "Drive," Naruto said towards Shizuka, who was stunned in the cab below. Oh, Shizuka was stunned for a moment, and then she came to her senses. She slammed on the accelerator and flew out of the far door, onto the road. On this side, there are still a lot of dead bodies, but because the previous explosion has cleaned up many dead bodies, at this time, the dead bodies are sparsely standing in the middle of the road, and Yazi set up a machine gun and shot them. "Naruto, how did you make those explosions?" Yako asked while shooting. Naruto smiled mysteriously. "Next time you will know." Yazi smiled slightly, the machine gun in his hand swept wildly. Chug chug. The flames swept across the dead body like a dragon, and the dead bodies were shot through by bullets and flew out. The off-road vehicle rushed forward, and there was no dead body to stop it. Suddenly, at a corner in front, a group of small dead bodies suddenly appeared in front of everyone. Everyone was shocked when they saw it, and the machine guns in Yazi's hands quickly stopped firing. "That's a child." Yazi frowned at them, and let go of the machine gun in his hand, unable to start. It turned out that this group of dead bodies was formed by some infected children. They may have gathered here to play before, but they did not want a sudden disaster to take away their young lives. Looking at the tender bodies and faces of this group of children, everyone could not help but be silent for a while, and the off-road vehicle could not help but slow down. Every girl hides her motherhood, and most people like children very much. Therefore, when everyone in the car sees these dead children, they know that they are already their own enemies. But still a little reluctant to start. What should I do? The girls in the car hesitated. Although they had killed many other adult dead bodies before, when they killed those dead bodies, they didn't think so much. Instead, when they saw these children, they couldn't help but touch the softness in their hearts. Naruto frowned slightly, although he said that he couldn't bear it, but these dead bodies had no life after all, and they were like walking dead, so they didn't care who they were in front of them. To him, it's all the same. "Yako, shoot," Naruto said softly as he looked at Yakuza who didn't dare to shoot. Yazi glanced at him, and a trace of unbearable flashed in his eyes. Seeing that she really didn't want to attack, Naruto sighed slightly, shook his head and said, "Forget it, I'll do it." His hands lightly formed a seal, followed by a wave of his arm, and an invisible wind blade suddenly formed. In the next instant, the wind blade broke through the air, passing over the bodies of the dead children. Chi-chi. In one breath, the wind blade disappeared, and the dead bodies in front of them were all broken into two pieces. While the blood was pouring out, Naruto said in a deep voice, "Hurry up and drive. Now there is no time to waste. People who have become dead, even children, must be killed. Otherwise, we will die." Shizuka's body was shaken, her eyes flashed with determination, she stepped on the accelerator again, and the car slammed forward. And Yazi, still staring blankly at the corpses that were divided in two, gradually disappeared, as if he was lost in thought. At this moment, a pair of hands suddenly landed on her shoulders, and Naruto's voice sounded in her ears. "Sister Yazi, they have already become dead bodies, the only thing we can do is to kill them and not let them continue like this. Going on as a walking corpse, for the dead, isn't our killing a redemption for them? So, keep your normal attitude, Ms. Yazi, you are a girl who likes fighting very much in my impression. I'm a little uncomfortable with you being so soft." Naruto's words can't help but let the child's body and mind be shocked.